That is not, it's not convincing, I'll tell you. Looks like you guys are crashing a little bit. Like a Brampton man in a big rig, right? Like a Brampton man in a big rig. Is that too harsh? I hear some laughs. No, it's good? Okay. We got a good day planned for you here. A lot of good talks at the Bitcoin Treasury Bitcoin Conference. Ooh, a lot of people upstairs today. Good to see you guys. I actually don't even know how to get up there, if you can believe it. I know there's like coffee over here somewhere on the 3rd floor. What floor is this? That's just... now I've heard it all. Okay, interesting. The first talk today is going to be about the economic longwave, which you'll become familiar with. Joseph Barbuto, Richard Diaz, myself, and Rajat Soni, who I don't see. Or do I see him? There he is. You're a little late, but I'll stall for you. Are you ready? That's okay. I mean, the schedule's online. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the stage. Let's get after it. I said welcome, everybody, to the stage. These mics seem to work better than that mic does, so just grab it. Okay.
Testing.
Okay. Everybody on? Talking?
Hello.
Great to see everyone. Rajat, thanks for making it today. It's good that you... Thank you. Okay, let's introduce ourselves first a little bit. You guys know me, Joey, Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast. Rich, why don't you tell people who you are?
Hi, thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Richard Diaz, and I'm a global strategist with IceCap Asset Management, which is a portfolio manager that's based out of Halifax, but we have clients all over Canada and the world. I'm also co-host of the Loonie Hour podcast, which is Canada's best and brightest podcast.
So Loonie Hour fans, all right.
That's probably where you guys know me from, I'd say. And I'm pretty popular with Twitter, and the libs don't like me. So here you go, John.
Test. Hi, my name is Joseph Barbuto. You might know me as the economic longwave. It's just a theory that Nikolai Kondratyev discovered in the 1930s, and it was kind of dismissed because of central planning. But those of us who have studied macro cycles know that this is coming to an end, and it's going to end very badly. And the strategy is, how do we survive economic winter, which we're going to cover. When I discovered this, I felt like I've got to share this with people because we can try to save as many people as possible. How does this tie into Bitcoin? We are moving into a decentralized wave. Kondratyev studied 3 waves. We had a 4th wave, which is centralized governments, and now we're moving to a decentralized wave. And the good news is Bitcoin is part of that technological revolution.
Rajat, go ahead, brother.
My name is Rajat. I guess I'm known as somebody who just posts on YouTube, social media. I used to work at TD Bank as a fixed income analyst. I did that for a few years. Took me a little bit of time to really figure out what Bitcoin is, but once I really got it, once it clicked, I don't think you can go back. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Love it. I love it. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the economic cycles. They're all sort of colliding here. I think that's the theory, anyway, that these long wave, cyclical, I guess you could call them business cycles or social cycles, they all seem to be ending at the same time for the first time in a long time, which is a good name for a punk band, ending at the first time for a long time together, or whatever I said. Is this something that you think, I mean, Rich, from your point of view, you're working in macro. Are people talking about this in your field at all? Is this something that comes up when you're giving advice, doing research, or are we just like out to lunch here?
I mean, so I come from a sort of much more boring world than I would say than the more high-paced, technologically sophisticated world of Bitcoin. I come at it from an investment perspective. We manage money for people in a rather conservative, and you might even call it boring way. And these people are usually involved with banks and other asset management businesses that, when they do well, they speak to a skill set, and when markets go down, they say, oh, no one could have ever seen this coming. And so that's something that drives us totally crazy because we do sort of see it coming. We are at the end of, I don't call it the long wave, I'm focused on sort of long-term interest rates, and we are at the end of a 40, 45-year cycle. which peaked in 1982, bottomed in 2008, was delayed because of central bank intervention, which is one of the problems with 1929. But your short answer to your question is no, people don't, in our world, I'm not going to mention the big banks in Canada, certainly you guys know them, they're not at all interested, they're not only not talking about it, they're not interested in that view because that's not that way that they're incentivized. And so for our clients, we really try to focus on the risk and what to avoid. And right now, for example, bonds are something that we're really worried about. Government bonds, and then the knock-on effects to other types of credit products in that stack. So yeah, that's the way we sort of see it.
Just a little bit of background. Is that picture good? Okay. I managed capital for 23 years, and being bearish is not very popular in the industry. So it was always a clash I had. I think I've told some people the story is I started the investment business at the peak of the 1989 real estate bubble. So that was my first experience with money, actually losing a lot. And from that, it made me curious about understanding bubbles. And now with the help with AI, I've developed a program where basically you can spot every bubble that's in existence. And right now, AI is in a massive bubble. Okay, this chart is from, and the insight came from the next economic disaster. The long wave is a theory. Ray Dalio has A Big Debt Crisis, is a great book I'd recommend. There's so many philosophies on this. I just love the long wave because it's a social cycle. If you look at this chart, I overlaid it with the US history, and it's a private debt to GDP. Now, if you read The Next Economic Disaster, he says that at about, Richard Vague, who wrote the book, at anything above 150%, you're asking for a banking crisis, credit crisis, economic crisis. Peter Kundal, a great value manager, said that, valuations, and I would say private debt is a measurement of risk, not timing. It doesn't tell you when it's going to happen. Now, you can see in 29 that occurred at 154% private debt to GDP. Japan broke that record in 1991, about 217%, I believe, or 213. And Canada, you can see in 2020 during COVID, 245%. That's dropped down to 221. Okay, what does it tell you? It doesn't tell you when the banking crisis is coming. We believe in the next couple of years we're probably headed for one, but it does tell you that we have the red warning sign. It's like a hurricane, right? This is a satellite view. This is what's coming toward Canada. And we're going to have a massive banking crisis. Will it start next year? I think so. But I think in the next 2 years, the definitely is going to happen. You can see now we have one of the greatest private debt bubbles in history. So it's inevitable. And what that means, we're going to see maybe 1 or 2 Canadian banks go under. Now, people say, well, that's impossible. I said, well, that's fine, but you got to remember during the 2008 crisis where Canada sailed through and just went on to a bigger bubble, half of their banks do no longer exist here in 2025. To suggest that one bank won't go under is ludicrous because our private debt is such a level. One last point. That blow-off in 2020-21 came from the lowest interest rates in history. There is no precedent for an asset bubble blowing off from the zero bound. And that now, as you know, is unwinding in Toronto or in Ontario and BC. And here in Quebec, I understand that people say, what's going on? You're hitting new highs still, but you're going off into another asset bubble. I'll stop there.
Rajat, you worked for the bank. What do you think?
So I used to work at a bank, and there was no talk of this. Not at all. People were completely unaware. I think most people have no idea that something like this is happening. I don't think they see the significance of it. Just the impact over the long term is going to be huge, but like I said, most people have no idea. Most people are just trying to get through their day to day, right? And if they're struggling to pay for shelter, and if they're struggling to pay for just food, then I don't think they're paying attention to this at all. They're more struggling to get to the end of the week than they are to get to the end of the decade, and that's something that's really hurting a lot of people. But like we see in this chart here, things are getting worse. There's more debt. It's almost like playing a game of Monopoly where the banker just can't lose. right? And it's just getting worse and worse over time. It'll continue to get worse. I think that the game has to be reset, and that's what Bitcoin does.
So it's interesting. You look at this chart, and you have to ask, like, is that your debt to GDP, or are you just happy to see me, right? That spike at 245. With this number, and like you mentioned a banking crisis, are we in agreement on the stage that we're in for like a banking crisis? No? Okay, tell me why.
Well, I mean, the problem with this chart, is that it's not up to date. And so there's a couple of data points that are missing. You'll see it says Q4 2020. And so the reason I don't think we're necessarily in for a banking crisis is because the central banks won't allow it. And doesn't mean we won't be in for a crisis. It just means it'll be that crisis bubble will just shift to a different part of the capital curve. And so what we're seeing is, to me, we're seeing a couple of signs really quickly. One is inflation will be allowed to run hot. So 3 will be the new 2. They won't say it, of course. People will deny it, a conspiracy theory, all this bullshit. But we're seeing it already. The UK cut interest rates, inflation's at 4%. Canada cut interest rate, core inflation's at 3%. The US is cutting interest rates, inflation's at 3 and whatever. And so that's what they're trying to do, is inflate nominal GDP in order to bring this number down, the debt to GDP number down. And then the other thing is the people who are running the system, whether it's Tiff Macklem or Mark Carney's of the world, have every incentive to keep the party going, and so they will not go quietly into this good night, and that's why you see these massive budget deficits coming out, which again are inflationary. And so I think that there's going to be quite a bit more drag to this story than just a out-and-out banking crisis.
So maybe, Joel, I'll go back to you. It's interesting to talk about like inflation and stuff, and obviously the banks around the world have chosen to run it hot. There's a trial balloon in Canada. You may have seen, I think the FT or one of the Canadian publications, that the Bank of Canada is going to ignore core inflation as a mechanism for choosing interest rates. Completely backwards, batshit crazy, but to Rich's point, it allows for a run-it-hot policy that's backed by data. If you just ignore the data you don't like, which is nice. Joe, talk about what you think about Rich's thoughts there. Is a banking crisis necessarily like one huge implosion, or like you said, delayed and slow grind to serfdom?
Oblivion.
Yeah, it is delayed because the banking index just hit a new high, and so is the TSX. And I had to look at the data and know what the reasons are. And you can see the rest of Canada real estate prices, even here in Quebec, are hitting new highs. So until the rest of Canada rolls over. But saying that, Ontario and BC are exhibiting classic signs of a deflationary bust, in that not only are the speculators gone from the party, you see the banks retracing lending. So when you see a deflationary bust, it's a psychological phenomenon where the investors pull back and so do the banks. I mean, it's this classic joke. If you heard, the banks lend you an umbrella, when it starts to rain, they take it back, right? They retrench. So this is a psychological aspect, as we call it, economic winter. The psychology changes in mass from the top to the bottom. The public is not interested in leveraging anymore. The banks aren't interested in lending. Central authorities said, oops, we made a mistake and we need to change the economy. I will tell you that the resets will continue into 2026. So I believe the banking crisis is at least 6 months away. And how would you know if I'm wrong or right? Watch the banking stocks. And what's great about the stock market is it always will telegraph a story. If somebody knows inside what's going on with the bank's in trouble, you'll see a bank sell off a 5% move in a day. I think that's delayed for our next conference, and I'm sure by 2027 we'll be talking about the crisis in Canada. We'll let nature follow its historical pattern. And what I love about AI, by the way, is AI has its weakness, but I'm inputting everything in because I have an enormous amount of data that I use for my book, and I had to call it back. I give AI all the information, and it spits out a pattern recognition of exactly what's happened in the past. And to suggest that Canada's not going to go through a crisis, I'm talking about the ignorance of the public who isn't aware. They haven't studied history. You can't prevent social cycles from following its natural path, and that's what the theory of the long wave is.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you guys are saying here. The banks are definitely going to struggle over the next few years if there's a credit crunch. I don't know how long that'll take. It's much harder for people to take on loans because interest rates have gone up. People are, like I said, struggling to just make ends meet, and they're not really thinking about buying a house. Right? Which young person is thinking of buying a house right now? I think there was a stat for again, this is for the U.S. I'm more focused on the U.S., but in the U.S. there's more people who are over 70 buying houses than people who are 35 and under, which is just insane. And who's planning to lend to somebody who's 70 or older when there's a 30-year mortgage? How are you going to pay that back? How many people even live to 100? It's insane. It doesn't really make any sense. And I think like you guys said, this thing is going to fall apart. And I don't know how long it'll take. It could take 6 months. It could take a year. But eventually, like I said, everything needs to be reset. This thing needs to. It's a bubble that needs to be, I guess, slowly inflated. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of pain.
I don't know what the pain looks like. Sometimes when I think about what a bubble, like the damage a bubble could do on deflation or popping, we saw, at least for people my age, like I was born in '87, for people my age, we saw it in 2008, and that's basically the only bubble I know. And, I was barely sentient, at that time, thinking about the economy. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? You weren't having vodka sodas at the bar when you were 20 years old? Okay. Anyway, very rude of the crowd there. That's the only bubble I know. And the damage there was significant, and the response was swift and, proportionate to the monetary supply at the time, enormous. It sounds to me like everyone here thinks the response to the next bubble will need to be enormous, will need to be swift, but will be basically a neutered version of '08 because maybe there's a social aspect. People already understand that this thing is over, or maybe there's another fiscal response that just doesn't have the teeth, won't fix the problem. How does it look?
Are you talking about Canada?
Yeah.
I think it's a fair comparable, but I think there's some really important nuances in Canada. Canada has a housing debt problem, but unlike in the U.S., there was no funny business on the mortgage-backed securities and all those esoteric things. So that leverage component, the quadrupling of the leverage and all that squeeze just doesn't exist here. I think Canada is going through a crisis, but a completely different crisis. I think Canada is going through a productivity emergency. People in Loonie Hour know I'm talking about this all the time. And it's a function of the fact that we traded investment in real things, knock on wood, and capital goods for a bubble in credit and population growth. And those two things, as Joseph has illustrated and I've illustrated, are now popping. So nobody wants mass immigration. No one wanted mass immigration, but now we're all paying attention to it. And then the banks are pulling back as a function of the charts like we're seeing here. Unfortunately, there's nothing to pick us up on the bottom end, which is capital goods investment in things that are not buildings. Like natural resources, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you do not have any CapEx in productive assets, that productivity growth will continue to fall. Coupled with the population growth, there's zero support for GDP, which might bring forward a crisis in the banking sector against what I've said. But yeah, Canada, we have lived on basically this fake economy for a long time. And we have leadership that continues to not reckon with the reality. That's sort of my view.
Well, here's one thing that I have concern when the crisis does arrive. And this is what AI has spitted out when I've uploaded all the data I have going back 500 years. You need a private credit bubble, which will lead to a banking crisis, and because of Canada's situation, it's going to lead to a fiscal crisis, which is going to lead to a currency crisis. So the timing, we'll see this over the next 4 years. Here's the difference. In the 1920s, the last private debt bubble in North America, governments were paying down debt and they're running surpluses. When the bubble collapsed during the Great Depression, the private debt bubble, as you can see there with the US and also in Canada, governments stepped in, and this is when Keynesian economics became very popular. There were a lot of philosophies, included the Kondrativ cycle and Schumpeter's creative destruction. And they were against this because they knew exactly what's happening today. Governments will run perpetual deficits. Who cares? They're interested in being reelected. So when the crisis comes, we already hit the zero bound, so you cannot reinflate the bubble. And then governments are already running massive deficits. So they'll be forced, they will bail out the banks, bail out as many economies. Then they're going to run huge surpluses, which then the bond market's going to say, well, how are you going to pay us back? Now, we have resources, but I'm going to tell you something that really is scary, you're probably all ignorant of. During the crisis in Greece, in 2008, Canada and Greece 5-year yields were about the same, about 3-4%. And over the next 4 years in Greece, I don't know if anybody knows this story, but as they ran into their fiscal crisis, and I'm worried about not this high of interest rates, but could interest rates hit 10%, the 5-year yield in Greece, and you know most mortgages in Canada are tied to the 5-year yield, right? Went from 5 to 63%. Can you imagine if interest rates just went to 10% in Canada? It would totally collapse the real estate market. And that's simply because the bond market said, well, how are you going to pay us back? Now, I'm not suggesting we're going to go to 60, 50, 40. I don't know. Nobody knows. But I would say that the bond market in the US and Canada could shoot up to 10%. Historically, in asset bubbles, when they collapse, real interest rates rise 12%. So either that's going to be a combination of an inflationary policy or a deflation collapse, where because once deflation takes hold, you can't lower interest rates, below zero. So we'll get real rates. This is historically. I mean, I have data going back to 1500, and I've looked at every crisis and I've uploaded it. And with AI, it just is able to warn historically, probability, where we're headed. So that's my concern. Once the crisis hits within 2 years, what is the government going to do? We know what they're going to do, but it puts them in a fiscal situation, a difficult situation, which will impact a real estate market where most of the leverage is.
I think most people are not expecting that this is going to happen. I think by the time people see this happening, it's going to be too late, and there's going to be no way to reverse course. It's at that point, like these guys are saying, the real estate market will fall apart. We're going to see a lot less capital expenditure from companies. People aren't going to be buying as many investments. They're not going to be buying as many houses, of course. The prices of everything have to go down, and the current financial system can't handle that. It just can't handle that, because so much of it is purely based on the value of real estate. Like, think about all the banks that are giving out mortgages. They're giving out all this private lending to individuals to buy as many houses as they can, and they're relying on house prices going up. If house prices don't go up, the entire thing just falls apart. How does that even work? And even right now, I'm sure that they're struggling because people are scared. People have this emotional reaction to prices. When they see that prices are coming down, they don't want to buy. And then when they see prices going up, they want to buy as much as they can. So right now we're in that phase where prices are coming down and people are so fearful, and they're thinking, oh, I'm going to wait till next year, I'm going to wait till the following year, I'm going to wait till the following year after that to buy a house, because why would I buy it now if I know that it's going to drop 10, 15, 20% in the next few years? And for houses, because houses are so overpriced and just it's a massive bubble, especially in Canada. And I guess it wasn't cleared in 2008 like in the US. So the prices have just compounded and grown like insane. So you have condos that are selling for like $1 million when they're just like shoeboxes. And why would anybody really want to pay for that today if they know that the price is going to go down over time? So it's this, I think it's this deflationary spiral that we won't be able to print our way out of.
Yeah. Can I add to that quick?
Sure.
This is what I love about the theory. Okay, I'm going to say the long wave is a theory. I don't believe it's a theory. To me, I've been studying it for 23 years, but 33 years in the market, and it segments each part of the seasons. There's 4 seasons in the long wave. We're in autumn, where we're coming to an autumn. And Richard and I, we just met today, we talked about it before, and we have different backgrounds, but we have the same kind of view about this credit bubbles coming to an end. He came from a great credit firm, I think gave you some great insight that's very unique. And why you don't get it at the banks, I want to say this very quickly, because when I started the investment business, if you want to buy a mutual fund, banks thought it was risky. They weren't even in the business. So you have this ignorant crowd, and I mean ignorant crowd of 55 and under, who don't have any historical knowledge. They're just pushing out product. And now they're major players, and that's the biggest risk. Most of my clients are actually in the investment business. Financial advisors are looking for independent research, because I'm saying all the models of the past aren't going to work. So independent firms like what we would represent are the ones that are going to give you the answers and the truth. But you cannot get economic winter from contractive cycle without economic autumn. Economic autumn, and Richard has a different way of saying it, and this is, I think, why we kind of see the same thing, is we had the falling of interest rates and the financialization of the Canadian economy. What did the banks sell? Credit. What happened for 40 years? Its product fell. So people don't look at how much debt they were taking. They were looking at what's my cash flow per month, and now I could take on a $500,000 mortgage. I could take a $800,000 because what's my cash flow? But nobody thought that possibly could flip, and interest rates would start to move higher, and this is the stress we're seeing in Canada. So that's why I believe economic winter, a transitionary period, is inevitable, 100%, because you had all the precursors for a private credit collapse, what Japan went through in the 90s and what North America and Europe went through in the 1930s.
I think that the problem is that we underestimate the degree to which a soldier that does not know the war is over will fight. And I'm always reminded of, I love these, well, it's kind of a screwed up story, but you know these Japanese soldiers on an island in the Philippines, and 20 years later, he's still fighting to defend the emperor, etc. And so for all the worries about the housing market, there are going to be people who will hold on dear life. And for all the worries about the credit market, there's going to be governments and central bankers who are going to fight like hell to protect the system that's enriched them, their friends, and has protected their class. And the other thing I would just caution everybody is when we see we can't think of the housing market in Canada as a homogenous blob, because in Vancouver, yes, house prices to median income are 10x, but in Quebec City, they're not. And they're not in Kamloops or Red Deer, shout out to Red Deer, Alberta. But you know what I mean? So, and I think that we just need to be very careful about lumping in all these things. And the other thing, just quickly I'll say, I know we're running out of time, is that Canada is very, very wealthy. And it should be one of the richest countries in the world. And the only reason we're not is because of an ideology that is Malthusian in nature and that has basically given up on the future. And if you have a situation where you have a government, a change in philosophy at the top that rejects the Malthusian managed the decline idea that Canadians should be poor and apologetic for where we live and what we do and how we do it, all of this stuff that we are almost convinced will happen may be moot. Because if you attract foreign capital, if you invest in corporate businesses, if you cut taxes, cut regulation, and allow Canada to flourish the way it should, you might have what is the holy grail, which is productivity growth and sustained economic growth, which might subvert all these worries that we have. So anyway, just to give more positive.
That's a great way to finish. Okay. Thanks, guys. Great conversation. We'll, I guess, see you at the bar tonight, maybe? Okay. Thanks, everyone.
During the hockey game?
Oh, sure. Yeah, maybe. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
a round of applause. Good luck, boys.
Good morning, everybody. So, Ben Schmidt, real estate background. I'll just kind of quickly let everybody I think knows Lawrence, everybody's favorite gold bug turned Bitcoin maxi. Mason Ford, the night janitor of Colorado College, right? No? I got that wrong? Sorry, from the True North, and Aubrey Jesso of Beaver Bitcoin, hands down the best Bitcoin exchange name, for sure. So I'm just this Bitcoin, the future is bright. I'm gonna just kind of let it go down the aisle first and just softball. What about Bitcoin do you see in the future that you're excited about?
So basically, it's all laid out in my book, but Bitcoin is going to become the monetary standard of the world over the next 2 decades. And my grandkids will transact in sats, not dollars. The dollar will be gone. But 2 decades is a long time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Dialing in on the shorter term, what I kind of see is I think we're now at a period where there's a lot of pessimism and negativity, and everyone's frustrated, and which is kind of odd because we're still up 70 or 80% year over year from last June. But gold is kind of stealing the spotlight for a little while, and that's kind of got people concerned. And it doesn't have me concerned at all, because if you look at the 18, 19, and 20 time frame, particularly 19 and 20, what happened is gold took off first because it's more broadly distributed and it smelled all the monetary debasement. And then Bitcoin woke up and went from 10 to 60. 10,000 to 60, really fast. And it's like, the Christopher Walken thing, the lion sits around for a long time, doesn't do anything, and then it wakes up one day and just goes down and kills everybody. And that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to just come out and wipe everybody out in the next, year, in my opinion. So to me, we're sitting at a very exciting point in time. Gold has gone up a lot. I've been selling some of my gold stocks and positioning into Bitcoin. And I have a lot of Bitcoin to begin with, but the two they work in tandem. But gold is generally an early warning sign. And so, what I would say to everyone who's concerned that Bitcoin hasn't been going straight up recently is that gold tells you that the U.S. financial system is in a very, very precarious position, and the world has woken up to it.
Mason?
Yeah, I believe. I think the last panel pointed it out, that the next few years are going to be very hard and very volatile in the real world. And I think Bitcoin, of course, is going to do well, but broadly, a lot of people will be suffering from severe inflation. And I think that leads to a lot of chaos and general distress globally. Long term, I think once we get through that, and when Bitcoin is, much more valuable than it is today, what I'm bullish on is Bitcoiners being capital allocators of the future, being the people who decide what needs to be built, how should capital be allocated. And I think the people who will have Bitcoin at that point will be people who have a low time preference, who are thinking long term, and who are frugal and aren't going to waste capital on whatever it may be. So long term, that's what I'm bullish on.
Aubrey?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that Bitcoin's the best form of money the world's ever seen, and I think people are becoming less shy of expressing that, and it's becoming very clear. And we have people like Jock Mahlers on CNBC, and I think the narrative has just become super sharp and to the point. Bitcoin is the best form of money. It's coming after this 1,000 trillion or $500 trillion store of wealth assets globally, and I think that's hitting home with a lot of people. And so we talk a lot about store of value first, followed by medium of exchange. But the other thing I'm super excited about is the merchant adoption that we're seeing, which I think maybe a lot of people didn't anticipate. But we just saw recently Money Badger enable Bitcoin payments for 650,000 merchants in South Africa. And now with Square in the US, I think they've got something like 3 million businesses. And this is just happening overnight, and super bullish.
So the name of the talk is the Bitcoin, the future is bright. So I'm going to change that to Bitcoin, the future is bright, right? So I just have a few questions. I want to know what are these things positive? So Aubrey, I'll stay with you because when I first got into Bitcoin, number go up really was exciting, but it was kind of secondary. My father and I would speak every day about Bitcoin because we went down the rabbit hole together, and we would speak more philosophically about the sovereign movement, so the sovereign individual thesis, Bitcoin is Venice, all these type of, what societal impacts did Bitcoin, what was it going to be? And so right now, and I'm only going to do the Treasury talk once here, so we don't have to do this all, but right now this Treasury movement is maybe taking away from the educational component of Bitcoin, right? It's maybe muddying the waters a little bit to the normies because they're in the TradFi world, so they're kind of maybe getting to Bitcoin through that way, and they're not understanding how limited owning a UTXO on the base layer is going to be very rare, and 95% of the humans, in my opinion, are not going to transact on the base layer. So Treasury companies, is that a net positive to the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Hard to say if it's a net positive. I think it's inevitable. I don't think human psychology has changed at all this cycle. I think Treasury companies could very well be the catalyst for our next 80, 70% drawdown if they're not run responsibly. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Hard to say.
Okay. Mason, I was going to skip you. I didn't know if you had much to talk about at Treasuries, but if you've got...
Yeah, I think, in terms of a price drawdown, I think that really only happens if there's some systemic breakdown with strategy. Strategy is just, they hold 630,000 Bitcoin, and the rest of the treasuries hold 400,000. And so the next closest one is Marathon Digital, which is a mining company with 50,000, right? So 630,000, 50,000. And I think we saw this summer a whale dumped 80,000 on the market, right? And it was absorbed. So if a treasury company with 5,000 Bitcoin blows up, yeah, the market might go down a little, but I don't see a 70 or 80,000 or percent drop. But if there is some systemic risk with strategy, which could be a custodial risk, then potentially, yeah.
And just to quickly point on that, MicroStrategy strategy has roughly what kind of debt to equity position right now?
Ooh, I think they're around 14%.
So call that even 20%. That is, if you're going out to buy a home, you're putting 80% down. So, Lawrence, getting more to the preferreds and the preferred equities. I've read your book. It's fantastic. If everybody has not, make sure you read the big print. You were quite critical of derivatives.
Yeah.
And so now we have Bitcoin derivatives, right? And just kind of curious, there was that famous interview with Peter Schiff and Alex Mashinsky, where they were debating, and Schiff kept asking, where does the yield come from? If you're taking yield, you must be taking significant risk, or giving yield, there must be significant risk. Do you see these Bitcoin preferreds as being risky? And this is a two-parter. The big short is always often referred to, like everybody's using the big short as kind of our meme. At the end of the movie, there was an individual that had to go to prison. There was only one man that went to prison when it all blew up. Would you agree with me that Mason would be the appropriate individual to go to prison?
No, I think very highly of Mason. Let me start with the preferreds, or the Bitcoin treasury companies in general. There is a business case for a Bitcoin treasury company. What they do is they recycle capital. It's really just like a closed-end mutual fund or holding company for Bitcoin. And they recycle capital that's willing to trade off yield for volatility. That's all they do. Saylor pioneered it, and he's got the first one and the biggest one and the most successful one, the best run one, in my opinion. The others don't compare. They're close, but they don't compare. The question then becomes, what should they sell at a premium to the underlying coin? And I think that's still an open question. The market's kind of trying to find that. Is it one times MNAV? Is it 2? Is it 1.5? My personal view is kind of like a bank. They should probably maybe trade at 1.7 to 2 times MNAV. And that's because they're able to go out and sell securities with a lower yield, put that into Bitcoin, absorb the volatility of the Bitcoin. And if Saylor is paying his preferred holders 10%, but he's getting 30% on the holdings, averaged over time on the growth of the Bitcoin, that extra 20% is accruing to the shareholders. So, and he has plenty of tables and charts that show that he should be able to outperform underlying Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is the hurdle rate, right? We all know it's sound money, so you start there, you could just go buy Bitcoin. You don't need to buy a treasury company. But if you want more torque, you can do it. But that has more upside and more downside, as we've seen, particularly with some of these young ones that came out with a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, and they traded at crazy MNAVs that were unsustainable. And of course now some are trading below 1, which is very much what happens in closed-end mutual funds. Sometimes they trade below MNAV as well. With respect to the preferred being a derivative, it's really not. It's just a regular security secured by a corporation, and he will service that dividend by either, well, one is the value of the coins grow, the dividend will become small as a relative amount of the principal. But 2, he can sell new preferred, or he can sell new equity, or he can ultimately sell Bitcoin. And the dividends are well enough covered that my view is, unless he really levers it up, and I think Mason's right. I think it's about 14 to 20%, depends on how you count the debt and the preferreds. It's modest. I'm not sure he can go much beyond that. I think he's got to stay within some boundaries, because if he gets too levered up and we have a big downturn, he's going to have trouble. The equity is really going to get smashed. So. My book talked about derivatives in the sense that I was really actually talking more about the gold market, and what they've done is, the way they've run this Ponzi scheme is they've used paper gold derivatives to suppress the price of gold, and it's very blatant and obvious. They've been doing it for 50 years. If we reran the numbers today and you did if you took the same math that you had in 71 when the 261.5 million ounces of gold that the U.S. theoretically holds, and divided it into the money supply, you came up with a $35 reference price. If you did that same math today, the number would be $90,000 an ounce of gold. Gold's at $4,000. So guess what? They've created a lot of fiat. And so when we remark that fiat to gold or Bitcoin or some combination of the two, the fiat is going to be severely depreciated in terms of its purchasing power. And I think that's the thing that I think is the most important thing for people to focus on right now is we're just getting started here. We're like in the first or second inning of this monetary reset, and we've got a big whoosh, and everybody's like, oh, gold's up so much, I can't buy it here, it's too expensive. Well, you haven't seen anything yet. And the same is true of Bitcoin. I have a lot of friends who say, I can't pay 120 for Bitcoin, you paid 10. Well, yeah, but it's the seat on the lifeboat of a sinking fiat Titanic. Guess what? You want the seat or don't you? But the treasury companies, to me, are a net positive for the space, on balance. But they won't all survive, right?
So Mason, skipping the treasuries and moving more towards banks. So we've got multiple banks, JPM, Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley, now all referring to Bitcoin as digital gold. We have banks giving price predictions. We have the introduction as FASB. The removal of, I think it was SOB 151, I might be getting that wrong, so where banks can custody. So, and banks are holding significant portions of MicroStrategy, Strive. What does it mean for Bitcoin and Bitcoiners to be if the banks are getting here before 95% of humans, and not getting the ability to have that base layer sovereignty potentially is threatened. What do you feel about the banks being here before society?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at institutional adoption broadly, if we look at Strategy and BlackRock and all the other treasury companies, they have about 6% of the coins, like 4 to 6% of the coins. So that buying pressure, and there's a statistic like the majority of Bitcoin now has been bought above $90,000, which is significant. And a lot of that money is from the institutions. So when you look at who's benefiting from that, it's the 92, 94% of Bitcoin holders who bought in before the institutions are getting the economic gain from that. But yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about. I think everyone needs Bitcoin, and of course, it's like 0.1% of the population has it right now. I look around. I look at the Canadian ice hockey team, and I said to you, where are the 22-year-old Canadian boys? And I'm worried about my generation. I think my generation is feeling a lot of anxiety and nihilism and apathy. And I think they're broadly going to turn to political solutions for wealth redistribution, which historically has ended very poorly. So, yeah, I'm very concerned. What I see institutional adoption as potentially a way to force Bitcoin into the system as it is right now. Is it a perfect solution? No, but I see it as a transition, and I think it's better than nothing.
Aubrey, price of Bitcoin is always the number one topic, and I have a hard time wondering how are we just still here at this price point. When I was in Vegas, the kind of overarching consensus was that it was OGs from way back in the day that are selling at the $100,000 price point. So I guess a couple questions here is, what does that say for Bitcoin maximalism if we have our OGs converting into fiat, as well as just these exchanges and OTC desks? I'm not exactly sure how. A few years ago, or a year and a half ago, the idea was there was only about 1.4 million on exchange, and we were going to no longer have any, and the price was going to go parabolic. And I may be wrong, but I almost think that there might be more Bitcoin on exchanges than it was then. So, can you talk about the price, who these sellers are, and can you maybe just touch a little bit on the OTC desks and how they work?
Yeah, I think the notion of there's only X Bitcoin left on exchanges is dumb, really. Like, it's supply and demand. If the price is going up, it's going to entice somebody to sell, and that Bitcoin doesn't need to be on an exchange. They could just send it to the exchange. So I think it's a silly metric. In terms of OG selling, I think that's also expected. Some of these people have been holding Bitcoin for 12, 13, 14 years. They're probably having kids, and they've got to live their lives, and they're probably sitting on a big chunk of cash, and they're just thinking, okay, it's time to buy a house or buy an island.
Lawrence, so when it comes to price suppression, the gold I can kind of get my head around. Do you see any concerns with price suppression within Bitcoin, and how does that work?
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So there is paper Bitcoin, right? I mean, there are Bitcoin futures, perpetual futures that are traded on Binance, and I can walk in there and buy a Bitcoin contract, and you can sell me a Bitcoin contract. And so I just created demand for Bitcoin that didn't get reflected on the blockchain, paper Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has the same risk that gold has with respect to, derivatives and paper suppression. And my suspicion is probably a little bit of that's happening. The Binance perpetual futures have grown substantially. Last time I checked, it was around 16 billion. It may be bigger than that now. And so there are people who are on paper taking a short position against Bitcoin. I would compare it to gold, though, in the following way. I mean, they had 50 years to figure out how to suppress gold. Gold never did a 5-bagger in 6 months like Bitcoin did in 2000. And they had a whole system of the BIS and leasing and central banks coordinating and hedge funds down in the Cayman Islands that could buy and sell gold contracts. And there are probably, we can see actually statistically, there are like 100 paper claims for every ounce of gold that exists on the exchanges. So Bitcoin has not gotten, quote unquote, that bad, and in terms of the size of the futures market, and that's what you watch to know how bad it is. And furthermore, Bitcoin's a different kind of animal. I mean, gold never went up 6x in 6 months. If Bitcoin, I mean, Caitlin Long has said this to me several times, I think she's right. Somebody gets on the wrong side of a Bitcoin short, they're going to get their face ripped off. I mean, they're just going to get absolutely destroyed. You know, if something, I mean, and honestly, I could actually see that happening. My guess is there are probably some big, funds. I mean, I remember hearing there were a lot of people who were going long the NASDAQ and short Bitcoin to offset. These are big money managers in New York. I heard this from a friend who knows these guys. They're going long the NASDAQ, which is incredibly overvalued, and they're offsetting the risk of that by going short Bitcoin. I mean, they're on both sides. They're on the wrong side of both of those trades, right? And when that unwinds, oh my God, they're going to get destroyed. And this is how, I mean, those of us who've been in this asset for a long time, we know the thing trades like a wild animal. And so this is how we get to, 400,000, in the next 6 months or year. I mean, I sincerely think we could go there. And I don't think we have the 70% drawdowns that we had in the past. But I think, we definitely have the, 50% drawdowns. And how do you get a 50% drawdown? You go to, I mean, 400 is probably the outer range, but maybe you go to 250 or 300, and then you pull back to 150. And that's just a natural function of fear and greed and people getting too far over their skis with leverage. And it's, it's once again, it's the whole, when we get this thing fully on sound money, this whole, making money through leverage game is just going to go away. And that's a really good thing. I mean, right now, the whole goddamn world is a bunch of degenerate gamblers, right? And it's just, that's not adding value. Gambling does not add value. And yet, because fiat is depreciating so quickly, everybody feels like they have to gamble, even Bitcoiners. I mean, I saw some kid on Twitter, this drove me nuts. Like when Metaplanet first came out, good company, I like Dylan, I like, those guys. But he said, I sold all my Bitcoin to buy Metaplanet. What, 30 or 40% a year isn't enough for you? You want to go buy Metaplanet? I mean, and now Metaplanet's down 70% from where, I mean, come on, folks, wake up. I mean, this is highly asymmetric stuff. You just buy it and forget about it. And, I think today, I mean, if I look at the price right now today, I think there's a chance we're going to get a flush down into the 80s or 90,000. I kind of hope we do, and it'll break a lot of trend lines. Everyone's going to freak the fuck out. And I'm going to be selling gold like crazy to go long Bitcoin and MSTR and, all the other stuff, because it trades in a very unpredictable manner. And you have to, those of us who've been trading it for a long time, we know that and we understand that. I bought it in Thanksgiving in 2017. It ran up to 60 or 70,000. I was blown away. I thought, oh my God, here we go. Fiat's going to fail. And I'm buying coins like crazy at 17,000 bucks. Well, a year later it was at 9. I doubled down. A year later it was at 4 or 5. I doubled down again. I mean, this is how you do it. You buy it when it's on sale, and then you don't sell it. And you just wait, and you let the 5-year cycle, 4-year cycle play out.
So we talked treasuries, we talked derivatives, we talked banks, and we've talked price. So I want to quickly go into politics, I guess.
Oh boy.
So there's a lot to talk about. We could talk about the SBR. Is that a thing and not a thing? We got a kind of a pro-Bitcoiner president who's also a shitcoiner. The Loomis Act we could talk about. We've got many jurisdictions getting into but quite recently we had the Clarity Act and the Genius Act. So the Clarity Act, giving governance or regulation around commodities, securities, stablecoins, and the Genius Act was specific to stablecoins. So I'm just going to try to quickly summarize a video that I came across about the concerns with stablecoins, where a stablecoin is, somehow it's also built on Tron. I don't even know what the hell that is, or these other, but no longer are these stablecoins able to just be backed by dollars, but they're backed by U.S. Treasuries, which is U.S. debt. Right? And so U.S. Treasuries have been tokenized. These tokenized treasuries are circulating around the world as stable coins. They carry a zero yield. It's a brand new financial instrument. People are going to wake up to realize that they are in a non-consensual, negative yielding tokenized treasury rather than a stable coin. Trump has potentially bypassed the Fed and bypassed central banks, commercial banks, the SWIFT network, and being able to export the US inflation globally. And then with a flick of a pen or a keystroke, the entire world could be on a global CBDC. So that was those aren't my thoughts. That was a video that I came across, and I thought it was quite interesting. So stable coins, are these a net positive for the world, for Bitcoin? How do you guys see stable coins? And I'll throw it out to anybody.
Again, I think it's a transition, and if it's inevitable, it's like, okay, we have to go through it and just try not to fall into the trap of stable coins on or attached to a digital ID. I think that's the biggest risk. Christine Lagarde herself, president of the ECB, said if there's an escape hatch, people will use it. I think the stablecoin CBDC combined with the digital ID is their attempt at closing the hatch, and so we should try to avoid that. And I mean, the best thing we can obviously do is just self-custody and promote and teach people how to self-custody their Bitcoin.
Amen. In your explanation, when we release stable coins out into the world, I work in a company in Brazil. Brazilians want the dollar over the real, and I think that's the case for pretty much every country around the world. But dollar inflation then becomes global taxation, and it's just a way of subjugating the rest of the world in the manner in which we have been doing via the IMF and other organizations, but this is a little bit more direct and efficient in that subjugation.
Yeah, it's a longer discussion than we have time for, but I will say briefly that I think the Trump administration is trying to push the narrative that stablecoins are going to solve the debt problem, and that by growing the stablecoin market big enough, they're going to buy all the T-bills, and okay, everything's going to be happy. And that's not right. They're being wildly too optimistic, just like they were with Doge. The stablecoin market is a couple $100 billion. It's growing at 50% a year. Most of it is just really replacing the SWIFT system for Russia and others who got shut out of that. And we've got $10 trillion of debt to roll over every year. So, yeah, stablecoins buy treasury bills, but 10 trillion and a couple $100 billion, that's a big difference. And then, they've made a lot of noise about them, but I think that really is kind of what it is. It's noise.
We do have to end, but do you see that as a positive, that he might be able to bypass the Fed by doing this? Do you see it the same way?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought that through. I mean, everyone knows my view on the Fed. The Fed needs to be shut down. Right. And we just, it's really simple. There should be no Fed.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have.
Let me just say, if I can just make a pitch. I do have some books. I'll be signing them. I'm up on the 3rd floor from now until my next panel at 1:30. So if anyone's interested, they're for sale.
Lawrence, Mason, Aubrey, thank you very much.
basically we're living through the Matrix now. It's realistic enough that it feels real, but it's just not real.
Fiat keeps you on the hamster wheel forever and ever and ever.
Your average fiat paper, you put it under your mattress, it's lost half of its value.
Fiat is stressful, and not having enough money to pay the bills and maxing out your credit cards and paying 21% interest rates is super stressful.
The average fiat currency or total fiat currency supply increases at around 14% per year. Well, 14% means you lose 50% in 5 years. They've broken this natural order of life where they just figured out that you don't have to worry.
We have a solution to this. The solution is very clear.
Thank God Bitcoin has been invented.
Think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. There's such an opportunity here to recapitalize America's balance sheet.
The Bitcoin network and the software and the protocol are extremely stable.
Once I put it in cyberspace, it's not just immortal, it's pure energy.
Bitcoin is the exact opposite, right? It gives you a low time preference. It actually not only preserves your purchasing power, but it appreciates your purchasing power over time.
What that means is prices continue to fall against Bitcoin forever.
It can return us to an economy of saving, an economy of something based on value.
I think that is literally like Bitcoin's time to shine, to show the world that it is a safe haven asset.
If there's a strategic Bitcoin reserve, we're going to see the price of Bitcoin go up, and there could be a game theory phenomenon happening.
Bitcoin will never die as long as there's one person alive in this world that yearns for freedom.
Rather than waving flags in the street to protest things we don't believe in politically, we're going to use the power of cryptography to technologically defend human rights.
Bitcoiners are very optimistic and hopeful for the future. And Bitcoiners understand what's broken, and they understand that they have the solution.
And then all of the $900 trillion of capital is going to pursue it on some level.
Oh my God, it's the best drug on earth. There's nothing like it. I've done cocaine, Cedric. This is better than cocaine. It feels amazing.
Bitcoin is a chance to be part of something that will have more of a lasting impact on the world than anything else you could possibly be involved in.
It's a more robust platform, and this thing comes in peace. It's not looking to destroy them. It's not declaring war on them. It's declaring peace on everyone. It says, come if you want.
You have to believe that you are the kind of person who can participate in the Bitcoin story.
Hey, what's up, Canadian Bitcoin Conference? What an honor to be here. First, I want to thank our hosts, Daniel and Manuela, for putting this all together. What a fabulous space and bringing us all together and connecting us. I'm really excited to get into this panel with my good friends here, Tomer and Nico. I hope you enjoyed the video that we just played. Something I think a lot about is maybe the only things in life that I think are scarce are Bitcoin, time, and family. And I started a podcast because I really couldn't even get that message across to friends and family in my real life. And I'm hoping maybe we can get into what is it like living on a Bitcoin standard, and how does it affect the things in your life that you can't buy or trade for, or that that you can't really use economic success or achievement to kind of bring into your life, or how it affects it. So I kind of want to open it up to you guys. How does Bitcoin maybe affect these other things in your life?
Sure. We were talking a little bit about this beforehand, and I guess the right framing is, you work hard to attain your values, and some values are values that you can buy with money. It's coffee. Everyone talks about buying coffee. But there are values that money can't buy. And if you think about it, some of them are internal. They're like your own self-esteem. You can't go to a store and buy self-esteem. You can go to a shop and buy a Ferrari and a watch, a gold watch, but that doesn't actually make you feel good about yourself. It maybe makes you feel good that other people are jealous of you, but that again is an indication of a lack of self-esteem. So there are internal things that you have to work hard to earn. And then there are other external factors like friendship, right? Cedric, Nico, we're all friends. We've earned that friendship not by giving each other money, but we've earned it by spending time with each other and just being transparent and open and finding common values. So there's lots of these things that money can't buy, and they're really valuable. And it's hard, you don't want to live without, it's an empty life living without them, much emptier than living without coffee. And one of the things that Bitcoin does is it puts people on a path that helps them attain these values that money can't buy. So people come for the monetary gains, they stay for the revolution. And the revolution, we can go more into this, but I don't want to give too long-winded an answer. The revolution involves doing things that establish your self-esteem, your intelligence, your integrity, your honor, your friendship. And for many Bitcoiners, and I suspect it's many people in the audience here, they came for the money, they came for the gains, and the process of becoming a Bitcoiner, of having to study Bitcoin, having to study economics, having to learn things, having to put all that time and energy and making all these friends has given them some of the values that money can't itself buy. And we'll get into family, I suppose, as well, but you've put your time and energy into not just getting money out, but getting a lot of the values that you can't even buy with money.
Yo! How you doing, Canada? You guys doing good? I love Canada. This is my second time in Montreal, and then I've been to Alberta, I think, earlier this year. And it's fantastic. You guys got a nice place up here. And I'm coming from Miami, so yeah, it's really cool. But anyways, yeah, like, look, most of the world is super nihilistic, and they don't understand why they're nihilistic, and it's really because, like, to put it bluntly, they're being stolen from. And what Bitcoin does is it gives you hope, it gives you your optimism back, which was stolen from you. And by giving you your optimism back, by giving you hope for the future, it allows you to plan for the future, it allows you to think about the future, it allows you to think about actually starting a family without going absolutely broke. And I think that gives you happy. I think that gives you, it makes you happy. It gives you peace. It gives you serenity. And most of the world is stuck on this rat wheel, essentially, of just this continued work harder, work harder. The fiat propagandists have even gotten to a point that they're literally telling you, hey, you're going to own nothing and be happy. It's really gotten that bad, right? And Bitcoiners are saying, hey, that sucks ass. Own Bitcoin and be happy. And that sounds way better, does it not? So this is what we're fighting for. And make no mistake, this is a fight, because there's only two choices in front of us. And it's either Bitcoin or central bank digital currencies. And I'll clarify what that means. It's either Bitcoin or slavery. So don't ask what Bitcoin could do for you. Ask what you could do for Bitcoin. And this is how we're going to fucking win.
I'm kind of curious, though. I think to a lot of people who don't have Bitcoin, it sounds like living on a Bitcoin standard is like winning the lottery. And I'm trying to understand like how just being on a Bitcoin standard changes people from living on we want to escape the fiat matrix, but what does that actually mean when you do?
Yeah. Bitcoin isn't like winning the lottery. Winning the lottery is gambling, and I don't want to be too controversial here, but shitcoining is like winning the lottery. It's like, oh, I bought the right dog coin at the right time, and I have $1 million, but I didn't sell it at the right time, so I lost the $1 million. Bitcoin is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Bitcoin is trying to understand how the world really works, and to use things in the world that really work: energy, mathematics, social connections, technology, to create enduring store of value that you can then choose to spend when you want. So, and being a Bitcoiner, especially during this formative stage of Bitcoin, is work. So it's much more akin to building a company that's valuable for other people than it is gambling and winning the lottery. Everybody here is showing up to do some work to understand Bitcoin, to help be more articulate about it, to help understand it better so that they can use it better, and they're here for the long term, right? Like Larry was just up here talking about how when the price went down, he doubled down, and when it went down, he doubled down again. You can only do that with a conviction and understanding. That's not because he's a degenerate gambler. That's because he had a critical, objective, fundamental understanding of how Bitcoin worked. And so, like a company, everybody works for Bitcoin, and they put in a lot of time and effort. Unlike a company, Bitcoin doesn't have a founder, a president, a CEO, an HR department. So we're all here doing what we think is best for us to do for Bitcoin. It's not that we applied for a job and we got a job and now we have to perform according to somebody else's KPIs of what we have to do, and there's no performance review we get either. It's all internal. So I think that's part of the beauty and magic of Bitcoin, is like, come work for Bitcoin. You don't have to apply for a particular job, but you do have to figure out what job you want to do for Bitcoin. So it's not like winning the lottery at all.
How has Bitcoin maybe changed the conversation about money in terms of like with friends and family and approaching them and sort of giving them advice? Would you have given them, would you give your friends and family advice about money before Bitcoin? Would you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I think, I think once you transition to a Bitcoin standard, you're living on a Bitcoin standard, you know something that most people around you don't know. So naturally, you want your loved ones to start benefiting from this, but they absolutely look at you like a effing crazy person. But in reality, like, you want to help. And it's been my experience, over this decade, that most people, you could show them the door, but they have to open the door by themselves. But that tends to work to your favor because they'll never forget that you told them about Bitcoin in 2016 or 2017, and then, the price runs up to like 120K, and they're like, maybe I should have listened. So eventually, like, number go up does the convincing for you, and, your close ones, your friends, your family, they eventually take the orange pill, and then they start to see what you see. But I have never met someone in my life that has moved to a Bitcoin standard, not degen gambled or taken leverage or any of that, but just moved to a Bitcoin standard, hodled, and I've never met someone that their life has not improved. And I don't just mean on a financial level. I mean on a mental level, on a spiritual level. I think fiat is not only corrupt economically, I think it's morally corrupt. It's a money based on theft, right? So think about it from like that perspective of most of the world is still living with that operating system. And do you really want your family members, I just had a daughter, time flies, she's about 2, it feels like I just had her. But I know in my heart that she's gonna live in a world where, Bitcoin has won. She's gonna live in a world where she's gonna benefit from not having to work this rat wheel type of lifestyle. She's gonna be able to focus on her craft, make some money, and that's gonna be enough to live, because how the current fiat system works is you have to become a part-time investor just to maintain your purchasing power, which is absolute insanity. Like, what if you're like a carpenter and you're like really good at carpenting? I guess that's a word, right?
Carpentry.
There you go. I'm from Miami. I make up words all the time. What if you just want to focus on your craft, right? Let's say you're a successful carpenter and you're making over, $100,000 or $200,000 a year. You have disposable income. What do? Do you invest? What if you don't know anything about investment? Okay, you outsource that to a bank. They take a fee. they're not going to give you a great return. Bitcoin offers an alternative. It's like, look, all you got to do is buy Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, mine Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into self-custody, and it's going to give you a 30 to 20% CAGR for the next 20, 30 years, and you can go about your life, and everything around you is just going to get progressively cheaper. Like, that sounds effing fantastic. Most of the world hasn't got that message yet, and it's everybody in this room, it's your duty to propagate that message.
You know, one of the interesting things about the question that you asked, Cedric, is before Bitcoin, I certainly didn't give investment advice or monetary advice to people. I didn't have anything to say. I was very passionate about a lot of things. Say, oh, you got to go see this movie, you got to read this book, you got to go to that place on vacation. So there was a lot of stuff we talked about. I came across Bitcoin, and it was like the heavens opened before me, and here's something the likes of which I've never seen before, and I got very excited about it. I told a lot of people about it. The lesson learned, I didn't really convince too many people in the outset, right? Like, the discomfort about someone talking to you about doing something risky with your money makes people very suspicious. You know, it's like, this guy's trying to get me to buy this digital currency. Why? Like, what's in it for him? What's in it for me? He's so excited. Maybe he's really passionate about it. Good for him, but I'm unpersuaded. And it took a long time before people started to come around. And I think to your point, Nico, it wasn't until the price got really high a couple of times that people were like, okay, this is more than just a flyer. There's something else to this. And I think that that's probably the hardest thing that everybody who gets into Bitcoin finds. It's like, how do I actually, first of all, convince myself? Well, like, what are my objections to what's going on here, or what are my concerns? But once you overcome them, you get excited about telling people, because Bitcoin is a salvation of sorts, right? Like, you're in slavery in fiat, which you may or may not realize, and Bitcoin is freedom from that slavery. It is a savior. And so you want to help save as many people as you can. But if you tell them you're going to be their savior and they're going to make a lot of money in something that's volatile, where they might lose money initially by their calculus, they're worried that you're a scammer. And this is the hardest part, I think, with Bitcoin. Now, it's overcome a lot of these objections, right? Just take a look. If you go to the third floor now, there's so many people who've written books about Bitcoin. It's not, you don't write books about scams, because it takes a long time to write a book, and the scam, works itself through the system and ends. But the attempt to explain in detail and generate awareness of what's actually going on in the world and why Bitcoin fixes it is what so many people are so committed to, that they're motivated to write a book. And believe me, you're not motivated to write a book to make more money. You're motivated because there's a spiritual thing there.
Can I add to your point, Tomer? Like, sure. I think most people have, like, Stockholm syndrome. Like you have to understand, like, if you live in fiat world, or if you're in the fiat matrix, if you're in fiat matrix, you're in the matrix. Like, you don't, like, someone,
you're being exploited by the machine for your energy.
Correct. And you believe in it, right? Like, the way that they phrase it, this is public money, Bitcoin is private money, even though the Fed is, like, completely obfuscated. You can't audit it. If you create dollars out of thin air, that's counterfeiting. You go to jail. Anyone could make Bitcoin. Anyone could audit the Bitcoin blockchain. What sounds more private and public to you? But people still have that conception that, somehow this magic internet money is private, and then they rightly so have skepticism about it, right? They're like, oh my God, this could be a scam. But if you look at the data speaks for itself. Like, you always hear this, at least, in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada there's something very similar, which is like, the American dream is dead, right? Or the Canadian dream is dead. I don't know if that's a saying, but, it's the idea of, if you work really hard, if you get a job, you can get a house with a white picket fence, and et cetera, et cetera. That is dead. 100% that's dead. If you're on a fiat standard. If you're on a Bitcoin standard, it's thriving, because that house with the white picket fence, it's actually getting progressively cheaper over time, right? 5 years ago, that house maybe cost you 10 Bitcoin. Today, that house maybe costs you 5 Bitcoin. 10 years ago, I met Marty Malti, one of the first guys that emailed Satoshi. And he was making a presentation. It was called My Bitcoin Pizza Story. And he was talking about how he spent 10,000 Bitcoin buying a 1-bedroom flat in Finland, right? So that's just to give you a perspective. Like, on a Bitcoin standard, everything around you is getting progressively cheaper. And I love the way that Jeff Booth puts it, which is the natural state of the free market is deflationary. And the only thing that could actually reflect that is Bitcoin, because it's the only thing that is immune from government manipulation and control. So Bitcoin is essentially freeing humanity from the tyranny of central banking. That's what it's doing. And it's giving people back hope, and it's giving people back time that they could spend with their families. In fact, they can spend doing whatever the hell they want to do, whether that's surfing or being a carpenter. I don't know why I'm saying carpenter so much, but
You're just, the word carpentry is the word you keep looking. I want to add, like, the natural state of the free market is that people try to figure out how to make more of something less expensively all the time, and to innovate and to make it better all the time. There's one exception, and we want that, right? We want more homes, we want more cars, we want more food, we want more healthy food, we want more quality stuff. There's one thing we don't want more of, actually, which is more money, because money is just the exchange between other things of value. That's the only thing. And so whether it's the government that creates more money, or a factory maker who invents more beads, if you're using beads as money, or the prospectors, see, and I'm working for who find more gold. They're all creating more money if that thing is money, and that creates inflation, and that destroys people's ability to save and purchase. And I think this is the greatest thing about the invention of Bitcoin. It's something that not only can nobody create more of than is the specified amount, it's something that you can verify that nobody can create more of than the specified amount. So it's money that you can actually trust to last over time and to experience that productivity gain everywhere. And with money that can be created everywhere, the game gets played to exchange that easily produced money for power, political power, all sorts of other things. And that's what's creating a lot of the ills in our civilization today. It's like after 50, 55 years of fiat money now, we have governments, and so government isn't inherently bad, but we have government that's been inherently corrupted by the money that it can print, because what does it do? It's two parties vying for your vote by offering to give you free money, which isn't really free. It's just debasing somebody else's money and debasing yours at the same time. And so the game of politics will change when we move to a hard money standard. I think that's a big part of what many Bitcoiners talk about. Larry was talking about it just before. So to really understand the value of Bitcoin is to understand this is the first time in history we have something that can't be used for anything else other than money, but also can't be increased in supply. And so the debasement of it is impossible. And that's what we have to defend, but it's quite easy to defend. You run a node and don't change the code.
Yeah. And think about the carpenter, or someone making $100,000, $200,000 a year. A few years ago, they could buy, or at least in their earning power, 25 or 50 Bitcoin per year. Maybe they couldn't save all that. Now that's 1 or 2 Bitcoin per year, and at $1 million per Bitcoin, they're working for 0.1. And if they were lucky enough to maybe save over time 10 Bitcoin, and now that just is not a meaningful sort of increase to their stack in Bitcoin terms, and thinking about salaries in Bitcoin terms and seeing how much they're getting cheaper, I think is interesting. And the other thing I think is Michael Dunworth says people are like private keys. So we can't make more Bitcoin without a hard fork. We can't biologically and with resource limitations make more family. We can't really scale it, and you can't make more time. So I really think about if you think you need more Bitcoin, you're probably not bullish enough. What you have now, if you've been stacking anything, will be enough. And I think what I think about is we have to get our private keys, our UTXOs, and our family to 2032 in one piece. And then that's kind of what I've been thinking about with this panel, is just what we need to do to go forward. But
yeah, I think that's very true. One of the troubling things about this cycle specifically is which was an inevitability, which is you're seeing the financialization of Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is entering into Wall Street. I think that plays into a part of like the recent price action that we're seeing this year. Bitcoin has changed since the launch of the ETF in January of 2024. And it became, obviously so, the most successful ETF launch in history. It is the most profitable ETF for BlackRock currently. Daddy Fink is on our side. Fantastic. Bitcoin Employee of the Year, of the month. But to add to Cedric's point, right, what I find troubling is people have forgotten the importance of self-custody. In order for you to truly become sovereign and for you to truly reclaim back your financial sovereignty, if it's not your keys, it ain't your cheese, right? And what's concerning is that, again, this cycle, people, they see the ETFs and they're like, oh, the ETFs are convenient, this is great, this is fine. But none of that replaces true spot Bitcoin. And the reason I say that is because spot Bitcoin gives you a tremendous amount of power as an individual. It gives you the power to vote with your feet. So if you live in a hostile jurisdiction, and we have the privilege of living in the West where perhaps, the governments aren't so unstable, but where I'm originally from, Venezuela, there's stories of people that literally the only thing that they can take with them is Bitcoin to cross the border, to go to another more favorable jurisdiction. And before that wasn't possible. The fact
Nico, Canada has 5 banks, and the government has, in recent years, said the following people can't access their money.
There you go. I mean, the Canadian truckers protest.
That's the one.
So, if you have Bitcoin in self-custody, I love how one of the Canadian companies responded to the Canadian government, which was basically like, look, we couldn't give you this Bitcoin even if we wanted to. Right? And that's the power of taking Bitcoin into self-custody. You're reclaiming back your financial sovereignty. And if you do that for you and your family, again, it puts you in a very advantageous position. And I think people have forgotten about the importance of self-custody. So even though there's these very convenient ETFs, even though, it's never been easier to get exposure to Bitcoin through the treasury companies, I think none of that is a replacement to true spot Bitcoin in self-custody, and I think that's going to provide the ultimate benefit for your family.
I think this is a good example to the earlier point that I was making about how incredible Bitcoin is and how hard it is to explain to people how incredible it is and how important it is. We talk about the fixed supply and the verifiability of the fixed supply. We talk about the self-custody, the fact that it is money that you can take with you and store in your head even if need be, and that nobody can stop you from spending, this permissionless, censorship resistant. These aren't words that people know, right? If you tell someone this thing is permissionless or it's censorship resistance or it's supply cap, they haven't heard these expressions before. It's not common verbiage. So Bitcoin is like this total invention of something that people haven't seen the likes of it before, and so it becomes hard, and you have to recognize then that in orange pilling other people, you have to go slow, and the longer you've been in Bitcoin, the more you have these expressions like not your keys, not your cheese, or 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, or whatever, and that goes over everybody's head. But to the question that you were asking, Cedric, like what do you need to do to get yourself to 2032, I assume it's just a year, you're saying out in the future where Bitcoin's valuable enough and recognized enough that you've gotten there, because there's a lot of chaos between now and then. That's a hard thing to know, right? Like, do you hunker down? Do you move into somewhere that's distant? Do you just roll the dice? And I think that's something that nobody can actually know, right? You have to, you may want to take some diversification bets, like have different locations that you can get to, but if crisis happens, at least if you have self-sovereign Bitcoin, you can take it with you wherever you go. If your Bitcoin is in the ETF and there's a financial crisis and banks get shut down, or there's controls as to how much you can withdraw or take out or how you can use it, you're not protected against that. So I think understanding how Bitcoin works gives you more optionality. It's not a guarantee, right? If shit hits the fan, it hits the fan, and if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's unfortunate. But you can't plan for everything, right? And it is a chaotic world. But you can plan for a lot of things that you need to be worried about. And Bitcoin fixes a lot of the, is the plan for a lot of those things if you use it the way that it was created to be used.
One last thing I'll say is, guys, at the end of the day, remember, Bitcoin is a revolution. If enough of us take self-custody, we win, and there's absolutely nothing they could do about it.
Yep. Self-custody your own Bitcoin. That is the key. Protect your seed phrase, stamp it. It's about self-custody Bitcoin, I really think. So we're out of time here. I want to thank you guys so much for exploring this topic with me.
Thanks, Cedric.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cedric.
Pew, 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 pew.
Okay, thanks for coming out, everybody. We're not sure who's supposed to moderate this one, so we're just gonna, I guess, have a conversation. We're talking about introductions. Introductions is usually how we do it.
Hi, I'm Sean Anstey. I'm the CEO of LQWD, a Lightning Network company in Canada. We're on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we've been in Bitcoin for a lot of years. And we're a Treasury 2.0 company. I mean, we have no debt, and we continue to build infrastructure around Bitcoin and promote Bitcoin. And we've been at it for, hard to believe, 14 years, 2012. Not just liquid myself personally, so
okay.
Time's gone by, but.
Perfect. My name's John Davitsky. I'm the CEO of MapleStrategy. We're a Bitcoin treasury company that's going to be coming out and listing on the TSXV sometime shortly. Our goal is really that Canada needs its own homegrown Bitcoin treasury at scale so it can really compete on the world stage. And we really have the goal to be the largest Bitcoin treasury in Canada and really bring the Canadian market together and create something that is a true winner.
I'll race you to it.
Good luck.
And I'm Brad Mills, and I'm here today with Team Bitcoin, repping the Canadian Bitcoin logo because my wife doesn't want to leave Canada. Not because I would love to stay here. So sorry, take the applause back. No, it's shout out to Hodler's official. It makes the greatest Team Bitcoin jerseys. He's always here hustling for sats, so I like to support that. But obviously invested in Canadian businesses, and then we have an interest, I'm sure all of us here, there's a lot of Americans here. Raise your hand if you are from America or traveled here from America. There's a few.
A few have left.
Okay, there's a few Americans. So our topic, I guess, is Canada leading or lagging or catching up? And I mean, I think we all kind of agree on this. Canada's the leader.
In many ways, we are the leader.
I'm just kidding.
I don't know. In some ways, we are the leader. I think our junior markets, our development markets are very used to a risk. for investing in gold and silver and different kind of resource information. So those markets there are willing to take on risk for junior companies involved in the space here. It's when you go up the line here and you start to get into other policy. Canada was the very first Bitcoin ETF in the world. Now, they didn't go willingly. OSC got sued, court sided, and ultimately it worked its way out, and it became the breaking point. But it's also very well respected when it comes to the United States. The United States, 80% of the world's money goes to New York. And when the SEC does something, all the other regulatory agencies look at what the United States is doing. We're no different in Canada. However, once our banks and once our institutions, once our public markets having an ETF, we are very well respected in that industry, and the United States is definitely looking at us. My other company, we works with regulators, and they are well aware of what's going on up here, and it bodes very well. So Canada has led and has created a lot of clarity, and just the fact that we've been bold early on. Now, on the current stage where we're at, we need to make sure there's better developer protections, and make sure that people's bank accounts don't get frozen, and the courts understand that code is open source free speech, and that's a very important thing for us.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we touch on Canada being the first to come out with a Bitcoin ETF, because it definitely was in name, but if you take a look at all the ETFs in Canada, all their Bitcoin is held in the US. We really need to change that, and we need to be getting these great Canadian custodians, trading partners, exchanges, the business back to Canada. And really, if we can do that, I think it'll really change the game, because there is a president sitting on the other side of the border that at any day could wake up and say, hey, you know what, maybe we put a tariff on something like that, Bitcoin held outside of the US, and that really changes the game. And there's some great operators in Canada, and I think they should really be highlighted and focused on and given a lot more thought, especially from these bigger ETF companies and large corporate investments in Canada.
Just in general, being Canadian and trying to use apps that can send money to someone in another country is just a terrible experience. Everybody's probably had the experience where an American friend is like, yeah, just Venmo me or just Cash App me, and we're like, do you take an email money transfer in Canadian dollars? Sorry, I can't pay you anyway. And then it's just we don't really lead in a lot of places because monopolies and protectionism, and we have this obsession with Canadian culture, and then we put these rules in place to protect Canadian culture, which really just creates a bunch of monopolies for the banks and the internet companies and the cell phone companies and things like that. So recently we went and met with a bunch of politicians on the Hill, and there was a lot of talk around, from both the Liberal and the Conservative side, about data sovereignty. They were really scared about Trump putting some kind of tariff or confiscating, surveilling our AI data centers and information around national security, if that's a real thing that we need in Canada. But there was this real obsession about, okay, the government needs to invest in our own data centers. And I kind of find it's kind of an interesting thought that, in a way, that's, I think, going to be like a Trojan horse into Bitcoin mining, into the government actually funding Bitcoin mining through this AI data center sort of build out, because Alberta is kind of separate. Kalea talks about it a lot. You might have heard her speak a few times already. She's doing amazing work in Alberta, shepherding kind of the government there. And Daniel Smith is a great leader with seeing the value of the Bitcoin mining for the economy. So Alberta is a sort of special case. They're leading. They're definitely leading. But in Canada, we're kind of lagging through fear. It's we're so scared of what the United States is going to do that we're going to then go ahead and invest a whole bunch of money into building all these data centers. Bitcoin is kind of this still politically third rail thing that they can't really touch. But just like shitcoins were a smokescreen for Bitcoin for the regulators, you had all the crazy collapses of Terra Luna and Celsius and all this other nonsense in the last cycle. And then they kind of allowed the Bitcoiners to build in the background and build political coalitions and things like that in the States. And Bitcoiners could kind of focus without being distracted by being a target of attack from regulators and governments. then they all blew up and then paved the way. And now you have the United States becoming like, looking at a Bitcoin treasury and all this stuff. We all know what's going on there. I kind of see the same thing might actually happen with AI, because AI is taking all the heat. AI is getting the like AI data center build out. Now it's okay, where before it was like we're going to ban Bitcoin mining in all these different provinces. Now it's like we're going to open up and like invest in power infrastructure and data centers and all this stuff. And really what's I think is going to end up happening is once the technological advancement becomes so far ahead, just like we had the DeepSeek moment back in the summer where the NVIDIA and all these stocks crashed because DeepSeek was so much more efficient to be able to process queries and stuff. Eventually we're going to get there. There's going to be a ceiling on where we get to like an AGI or something like that. And then it's going to focus on being efficient. And then it's going to be like all these data centers that won't be needed anymore for the efficiency gains to, like, it won't make sense to run all these data centers just to do AI processing. So what are they going to be? Like, I think they're going to be Bitcoin mines, and then we're going to have like the giant Canadian strategic Bitcoin mine because the government ended up going investing all this money into AI infrastructure that won't end up getting used. Well, that's just my thought on how we could become a leader in Bitcoin mining.
Well, at the end of the day, it's about power generation, right? And power generation is very important. And we've had this big movement in ESG, which has its place. We understand, protection of the environment and such. Some of it misguided, some of it not. But at the end of the day, historically speaking, when you generate power, you bring people out of economic poverty and you raise them up. And the race right now is to generate more electricity because we have AI, because we have electric cars, because we have Bitcoin. This is the digital age, and Bitcoin is that trust layer of the internet. It is the extension and continuation of the revolution of the internet, and energy is its protection. And energy is what has driven us to this point we are in society over the last 100 years. Look where we've come. And so the idea is to produce more electricity. You can conserve all you want, but you can only conserve so much. And so certainly, yeah, we need to embrace AI. It's here. It is reality. And within that, Bitcoin is a reality because it extends the internet itself and introduces new protocols. And we're not done with the revolution of the internet yet. And we also need to just have this mindset that we need to bring more people out of poverty. And that's the way you do it, by generating electricity and creating opportunities. So with that in the United States and where we're going with it in terms of, you talked about, meme coins and stuff like that, kind of opening the door and giving cover because regulators are busy with that. Right now they're busy with stable coins. The Genius Act that's down in the United States, which is the United States dollar being tokenized and so forth. And up here, I produced a document called the Maple Act. It's reviewed by the Shadow Finance Minister recently and others. But the same concept of they're going to deal with digitization of the dollar. Why? Because in the United States, nobody wants the treasuries. China's selling treasury like crazy, right? And so, but who wants treasuries? Well, stablecoin operators like Tether are massive treasury holders. So this gives the way for the United States to export their debt around the world. Stablecoins backed by the United States government, direct wallet to everybody that's out there, and everybody gets to do their thing. Now within that, that's just kind of a Trojan horse to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the true open rail that anybody can use. It is the internet. It does represent freedom, and this is just an opening gateway. So we'll get some more regulatory cover through that, and Bitcoin will continue just to build and do its thing, and the open protocol of freedom will march on.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the government could really do is incentivize some of these things, right? Like if they could incentivize people to say, hey, there's a tax rebate if you custody your Bitcoin in Canada for these large companies. You do something like that, I think they could repatriate a lot of this kind of Bitcoin. But really, when you take a look at where stuff is being custodied or where the rules are, it all comes down from the top, and then that filters into the banking system. And if you take a look at the banking system, they just really haven't embraced this the same way as from investing all the way down. And when they're not getting approvals and no one can invest in this stuff, the capital doesn't flow in. And in Canada, we have a retail market, but the majority of it is tied up in accounts that are controlled by bank advisors. In the US, they have Robinhood, where people can sort of make their own decisions, for better or worse. But really, in Canada, until you get that green light from the banks to say, Bitcoin companies are good, Bitcoin mining is good, Bitcoin infrastructure is good, you're never really going to get the big buy-in of Canada. You'll get the independents, you'll get the people that really believe in it, the people that are around here. But to get that real institutional buy-in, where the real next wave of the money coming, you need to get buy-in from the banks, and I think that the government can really push them to get involved and say things to them like that. use Canadian partners.
I agree with you, and I actually think the banks are working on it. They literally have this simmering in the back end. No, I've seen bank apps that integrate stuff. It's far down the road, and they see the future. Bitcoin.
Oh, Bitcoin, yeah.
Yeah, absolute Bitcoin, and this is coming. They know this is the future, and they're ready to go. And they have but they got to deal with the lawmakers. But it's going to happen in the United States first. We will follow what the SEC does, and then the Senate down there, and then we will quickly follow on with our infrastructure. Is my view what's going to happen, but we'll see.
It's funny because when we were kind of like meeting with government officials, we went with Finance Canada, and everybody knows that there's a problem in Canada with banking. There's individuals that try to go on a Bitcoin standard, have problems like I was not able to get a mortgage. I was very nervous. Thankfully, I didn't get debanked because I was like extra precautionary. I went in like 6 months ahead and I was like, met with the bank manager and I'm like, I'm going to sell Bitcoin. Are you going to close my account if I do that? This was like 8 years ago. And I was like, I need you to like tell me that you're not, I don't want to like have all this problem in my life if I'm gonna like have my bank account shut off if I sell some Bitcoin through my bank account. And they're like, oh no, we know you for a while, we're okay. But then like multiple times after that I tried to start a company and they're like, no, we can't give you a bank account for this Bitcoin company. Or even for the nonprofit, the Bitcoin Coalition of Canada, which is a nonprofit that does not do any kind of Bitcoin technology or anything. We just educate people about Bitcoin, and we couldn't even get a bank account. It's been very difficult. But then you go to like BitDeer, which is one of the biggest Bitcoin miners coming into Canada, $1 billion or so of investment going into Alberta, and they like couldn't get a bank account. And it's just really difficult to get bank accounts. So then we kind of hear from the banks are so scared to fund Bitcoin businesses because there's a lot of fraud or something like that, and there's not a lot of competition either, so they don't want to be the first one to make a mistake. And then the government's saying, well, we're hearing from the banks that they're okay with Bitcoin and they want to integrate with Bitcoin. And then obviously you see TD advertising for you to buy the Bitcoin ETF while denying Bitcoiners' bank accounts. So the whole thing's a big cluster. But the one thing where like we do lead in Canada is in the banking sector. We sold all of our gold in the 90s and early 2000s. So Canada has no gold. I think we have like 2 ounces of gold on the books. So we led there. We sold all of our gold. So it's kind of like sucks for Canadians to see gold going up, and we had a lot. And also we were the first before the United States. We went to fractional reserve. We went from fractional reserve banking to zero reserve banking back in the 90s. Like Canadian banks, reduced the reserve ratios to 0, and that basically moved us to a fictional reserve banking system where the banks were more regulated to have like different rules. Like you were expected to have enough cash in the banks for 30 days worth of expected outflows. So that's all. They didn't really need to. It's not the money multiplier thing where it's like you deposit 10,000 and then they can make 100,000 and loan it out. Literally, they can print money from nothing with no restrictions other than the demand that we have to borrow the money. That didn't come to the United States until COVID. So there's a lot of places where Canada is kind of like the petri dish for the bigger economies. And I was actually extremely surprised. I was a seed investor in 3IQ, and I did not expect that we were going to win that fight with OSC and get the first Bitcoin ETF. I was just like, well, Canada follows the United States, so we're probably not going to get it. But then we won. So every once in a while, there's like a surprise happens where Canada does kind of have a little bit of a lead. And I don't know if that's going to be the case with Bitcoin adoption, but it does seem like there's interest from meeting with and just paying attention a little bit to the political conversations. The leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, is extremely supportive of Bitcoin, very interested. Like his staff are interested. They're very much wanting to learn about Bitcoin. Even some of the liberals. There was Joel Lightbound spoke last year at this conference, but this year, one of the communications guys for one of the ministers that we met with recently was the CEO of a public Bitcoin mining company for 3 years. So these, like, he was the CEO of a public Bitcoin mining company for 3 years, and now he's the communications director for a liberal minister. And they were very much aware of the benefits of Bitcoin. He worked on the ERCOT system in Texas. Like, he gets the benefit to raising people up from poverty and helping the energy grid, like you were saying, Sean. So it's, maybe we have the ability to lead, but Canada is also, I don't know if you guys know why this is, but there seems to be, it's just like status quo. And I don't know if it's going to have to be the economic longwave moment like Joseph was talking about earlier. Like, there has to be just a crazy crisis before everybody just wakes up, and then it becomes more of like, it's impacting your life so much because there's a crash and a crisis, and then things change. Because it seems like we're just trying to kick the can down the road as long as we can, but like the market's kind of like going to do what it's going to do. And
Market will do what it's going to do, and I don't disagree. We kick it down. I think one of our benefits, and it's kind of this counterintuitive thing, is that the fact that we're so conservative in our banking, that we're so conservative just in our approach compared to other countries, when we do something, it gets respected. So then people are like, well, if Canada did it, there must be something to it. And that does happen. We've talked to a lot of people in the United States, a lot of regulators, and so they look at what's going on up here because they respect. There's a lot of respect on that level, on the banking level, on the regulatory level. So when things do get pushed through, questions get asked, and well, why did Canada do it? Why aren't we doing it? And so, as opposed to some, they did a Bitcoin ETF in Guatemala. Well, no one cares. It's like, no disrespect to Guatemala. I'm just simply saying, we're a G7 country. And so that conservative approach where we are cautious, but when we do something, it matters, and then that goes a long way. But at the end of the day, we have to keep pushing. And I think, like you said, our narrative is right now we need to focus on energy generation, and Bitcoin adoption is coming here. We see it, and we actually have very, very good internet penetration across Canada and growing. And this is important because, the digital world, it's the internet. We think that the internet's everywhere around the world, but there's certain countries only, 30, 40% penetration across the world, changing with satellites, of course. But everything we see here is still a continuation of the revolution of the internet. We think it just stopped with the iPhone? No. This is it. This is the 8th layer, the trust layer, the finance layer of the internet is being put in place as inverting the entire system. And back in the 90s, telecom companies went to court to try to stop parts of the internet. And now that this is their entire business, so they try to fight against what was the inevitable, which they were going to do. They couldn't wrap their brains around it. Banks and other stuff may fight against that too. And I remember this distinctly. If you had a .com in your name, which we did, you had trouble getting a bank account because the internet was evil and used by hackers, and it was like really? And why would I ever want to shop online? Why would I ever use email? I'll go to the post office, mail a letter. That very quickly changed. And now we're at this point where everything is hyper accelerating because the first part of the internet's put in there with communication. And technologies succeed when they're 10x better than what's out there. Well, Bitcoin's 100x better, and the new infrastructure layers are 100x better and beyond, and sets the precedence for the next 200 years of the digital age, and sets the layer for the machine-to-machine and AI economy, because machines will pay machines, and AI will pay AI for authentication in ways we don't even know yet. And this will be bigger than the human payment economy because they need instant and accurate settlement to do things in ways we don't even know. So this is, we keep pressing forward with Canada here, and I think our capital markets have been embracing what's going on here. It's pushed the envelope for sure, because we know this from our own company. We've been able to talk about Lightning Network and other things we're doing in there, and slowly, we get through on the regulatory front, and we push forward.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things I want to touch on that you said is just how the Canadian banking is viewed around the world. And the Canadian banks didn't go under or take out bailouts in 2008, and I think that people remember that kind of stuff. And I think that it puts us on another level, and maybe that is one of the reasons why these banks are taking a little bit longer, because they really want to be sure that this is something that has staying power and going through. But it's encouraging to hear that you're saying that, high up, that they're really going through this whole process. It's just, how long is it really going to take them? I mean, I always have this analogy that I talk to some people that have taken out money from financial advisors to go in and buy Bitcoin, and they say, they always get pushback at the bank saying, are you sure you want to take this money out? Who's advised you to do this? And they want to ask you all these different questions, and they're like, well, fiat sucks. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. So I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. And, that isn't a good enough answer, but somebody somewhere at a bank has to document that and put that in their notes and make sure that they have everything. And I go to ask these people, I say, ask your broker, say, what do you think of Bitcoin? And the brokers usually say, yeah, I know what it is, I understand it, but we can't advise it. We're not allowed to do that right now. And I always go back and I say, what level do you think Bitcoin would have to get to for your advisor at a regulated brokerage firm to advise spot Bitcoin? I mean, my guess would be probably close to $1 million. Like, that's when you're going to see it. It's just so far off because they just think of it as still this evil thing like you're talking about. If they thought it was evil to open a bank account, how long does it take to go evil to open a bank account? Let's advise on this.
Well, this happened to a good friend of mine, actually. He was my financial advisor, and he eventually quit doing it because I orange pilled him, and now he's a Bitcoin advisor. So he actually spoke last year at the conference, but what happened with him was he saw the scam, and through Bitcoin, through getting orange pilled, he saw the scam of the system he was in, and he left doing it, and he was pissed. And really what it is like, to be a regulated financial advisor in Canada, independent, you have to have a sponsor. And the sponsor is one of the big companies, that have the ability to, I think they're registered dealers or whatever, and they want you to sell their products. They make fees off selling their products. They just have these global ETFs and all this stuff where they make 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever it is on that. So they want the star advisors to go sell their products. Technically, they're allowed to sell whatever they want. They like, your fiduciary duty should be, as an advisor, to give Bitcoin, to help somebody protect their wealth and grow their wealth over time using whatever products are available. But it's a bit of a scammy system here because the large companies, again, another monopoly in Canada, surprise, surprise, they want you to sell their products. And if you're a star advisor, like being successful, showing proof of work, going out there, traveling, getting clients onboarded, and then not selling the products because they're not the best, because you're actually caring about the fiduciary duty part of it, and you're putting people into things that are actually going to help them, well, they will go and they'll witch hunt you and find a way to just get rid of your sponsorship, get rid of your license, make your life a living hell, because they don't want Bitcoin, unless they can make money off of it. They don't want their advisors giving people Bitcoin because that's how they make their fees off of milking people.
Follow the incentives, right?
Yeah. So it was kind of frustrating seeing what happened to him, but it was cool to see him realize that. But then it kind of goes back to the whole thing is like, are we leading or are we catching up? I mean, top down seems like more of the United States way of things. Like the president is now into Bitcoin, and so like that kind of will have a huge effect. And like large influencers into Bitcoin. Michael Saylor is like probably one of the biggest Bitcoin evangelists in history, and like he's created so many new Bitcoiners through his ability to like communicate effectively to these influential people. But here in Canada, like, we have a lot of influential Bitcoiners, we have a lot of smart cryptographers, a lot of great Bitcoin companies. Like, we punch above our weight for sure. But unfortunately, like, we're losing Bitcoiners to other countries because, the political system here, free speech is under threat. We've got like financial surveillance, like even worse than the United States. Property rights are at risk. And the trajectory is not the best, it's not the worst, but it's, if you're a sovereign individual, you're kind of probably going to exercise your ability to vote with your feet and vote with your fiat and like get Bitcoin and get out. So we're seeing that happen a lot. But if you are staying in Canada and it's something, you got your family here, whatever it is, you don't want to leave Canada, I mean, you can lead by actually going and getting involved politically in your local, area. That's kind of what I've been trying to do. I'm not really having a huge effect on the large scheme, but I'm just, I got out of politics, caring about politics 10, 15 years ago when, eventually Bitcoin became my politics. I'm sure a lot of us feel this way. And then we just felt disillusioned by the whole game, like we're not represented. But now it's like, okay, well, if you want to stay here and we have these crazy surveillance bills and anti-free speech bills and stuff coming, you kind of got to get a little bit active or leave or just kind of deal with the consequences. So what I've discovered in this journey of trying to like get, into that scene a little bit and go meeting with politicians and stuff, they really do care when you show up. Like the MPs don't get a lot of engagement at the local level. So if you had the initiative to want to like write a letter, make a phone call, go show up to a local debate, whatever it is, every one Bitcoiner that shows up to one of those meetings, writes a letter, makes a phone call in Canada is worth like 100 people doing it in the United States, because there's way less people active in politics here in Canada at the local level. And then the more, we do, there's millions of Bitcoin holders in Canada, and not many of us are politically active, but we're a group of people that we're almost single issue voters. We care about Bitcoin, protecting free speech, protecting property rights, sound money, all these issues. So I would say if you want to be a leader yourself, what you can do is just take what you can do in your power, which is, maybe it's not going to be massively impactful to the world, but it's something. It's like you will be able to punch above your own weight by just going and talking to your MP, showing up at the fundraiser, saying look, I'm a constituent, I care about Bitcoin. And they will take that as for every one person that shows up, there's 100 that haven't shown up that have the same view. So that is one thing I would say that we can all do to kind of lead the Bitcoin policy in Canada.
Power of the pound, right? You got to write. And get your voice out there. Your voice can't be heard. If there's nobody else saying anything, it's going to be a vacuum, and whoever speaks up will get heard. So we have to continue to press. We're right in the middle of the storm right now. And we will come out the other side. Open source will just march along. We've seen this before. This is the next phase of the internet. And when things are 10 or 100x better, it does get adopted, but it doesn't mean it's a clean adoption. It may take some time, but we keep the pressure on. All the forces start to align, and we'll get to where we need to go. And I think it's going to happen faster than we think. I think the next 5 years, you see the compression of 50 years because of the way that the world is working. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, it really does come from the top. You look at regulators, you look at things we're talking about advisors here, and that the CSE, where you actually have to get the Canadian Securities course to become an advisor, now has 1.5 pages speaking about Bitcoin in their textbook, that if anybody in this room has taken it, it's probably about this thick. So we're moving, but we're moving slowly, and I think it starts from the top. And as Brad said, if you can get out to your politicians and talk, these are the guys that can move the needle up top above there. That's better than just as one Bitcoiner. It's amplified by 100, so it's great.
And obviously get rid of all your snow pesos for sats.
Canadian peso, no more? We're not backed by anything, so I'm good faith and credit to the Canadian government. So we're hanging by a thread, All
right, time's up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Was that Jeb?
What was that?
Remember the politician in the States who had to say, please clap that one time? Who was it, Jeb? I don't think I'm low energy, but it sounded like it there. Anyway, what's going on? Good to see you again.
Hey, Joe. So there's a lot of Canadian legislation coming down the pipe that, so this talk was billed as a C2 fireside.
Yeah.
There's actually been a change to that. And beyond that, there is even 2 other bills that I think need to be, when you look at this entire picture, you have to look at C2, C8, and C9. And
can we get this? Do you guys have the slides?
No, it's here. It's right here. Okay. So this was a C2 fireside. C2 is supposed to be the Strong Borders Act, and there was a couple of tuck-ins into C2 that made it pretty scary. One of which included Canada Post was going to have the ability to open your mail without a warrant, so warrantless inspection of your postal mail. That was already in, so the ability for Canada Post to open your mail is already in the criminal code. They already have that structural right, but it has to be with a warrant. So the warrant part goes away. There's other things in C2, including a ban on cash transactions over $10,000, including serial transactions that amount to more than $10,000. And there was a tuck-in bill called, I can never remember it, Supporting Authorized Access to Information Act, SAAIA, which gave various government functionaries the ability to order ISPs and ESPs to basically wiretap your data or surrender your data to them without a warrant, okay? So that was C2, and then what happened was there was a lot of opposition to C2, including all the other parties. So they're kind of doing the same thing that they're doing with the budget. They sort of stripped out the bad bank and the good bank, so they took all the actual immigration part of C2, they reintroduced a new bill called C12, and that's the one that's actually on the Parliament track right now. C2 has kind of been skated into the boards, as they say, and it's on pause. However, they do want to bring back a Lawful Access Act at a later date, which basically is going to pick up all this C2 stuff and kind of redress it up and bring it back. But we're not off the hook, because there is also Bill C8, which is the cybersecurity bill. That was C26 under the Trudeau regime. And that has a lot of the stuff, the lawful access stuff that was in C2 is also in C8. And it basically gives authorized persons, which ranges from the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and the Ontario Securities Exchange and the Royal Canadian Mint, can all order ISPs and ESPs to surrender data. They can send representatives on site, request data, request access to data, request access to machines. And again, no warrant required, just a reasonable reason. And the kicker here is the ISP and the ESPs are what I call, gagged and bagged. You have a gag order that you you can't tell your customer, and you can't say that you've even received a gag, like an order. So you can't even talk about this. And then C9 is the online hate crimes bill, which just basically lowers the threshold for, there's already a criminal code definition of hate. They're going to lower it, the worry is they're going to lower the gauge, the threshold on what meets hate. It's going to apply to all online posts, and you're going to face ramifications for that. So I'll turn it over to you in a sec.
You can keep going. We have no slides here. Mark is just absolutely ripping off the top of his head, so this is impressive for me.
So I just wanted to outline the landscape of these three bills, 4 if you include C12. I'm actually able to see it, and then it disappears. But the other thing about C8, we see a lot of open mouth slop memes on social media about this, that Melanie Jolie is going to be able to order you off the internet. That actually is in C8, that they can order someone to, like an ISP, like Rogers or Fido or whoever, to stop rendering services to any individual or organization. And again, that service provider is bagged and gagged. They can't tell the user, right, that they've been cut off. They can't divulge to anyone that they've been cut off. So it really puts their hands behind their back. There was something else I was going to say before we start discussing it. I'm sure it's up. Oh, so then the status is, right, C2 on pause, C12 is in Parliament, C8 has passed second reading and it is in committee right now, and C9 is also second reading and in committee. What happens in committee a lot of times is, there's some hope here because sometimes in committee, rational discourse is allowed to pass through and some of the more onerous passages get stripped out of this legislation. Not to toot my own horn, but I sit on the board of the Canadian Internet Society. I'm really just kind of the bass player. There's some really heavy hitters on that board that do a lot of great work up on Parliament Hill. And they've had some wins in the past of getting some of these things stripped out, like the lawful access provisions of previous incarnations of these bills. So it doesn't happen in isolation. It might seem like these things just kind of get rammed down our throats, and they sort of do, but there is a process, there is some friction that gets put up against it. Whether it succeeds or fails in the long run is really up to us, I think, as a population. But I think that covers the lay of the land for the three bills that we're looking at. So what do you think of all that, Joey? You want to keep voting Liberal? Or?
I think you might need a glass of water. How many people here, before Mark just gave that killer crash course, knew about this stuff? Just show of hands. Like, I'm not saying you have to know everything about it, or but it's crossed your mind. You've read a bit. So if half the room, let's say, and you guys are terminally online, right? Would you say that you spend more time looking at this stuff than anyone else? So you can imagine at your church, at your local diner, at your gym, how many people are thinking about this? The answer is very few, which is not good. When I look at the landscape for privacy and data collection and information security and sort of the expectation that Canadians have for private comms, basically, is at the center of all this. What I see is a shift in the thinking of the population. This is not unique to Canada. This is happening everywhere. It used to be the case that rational actors in a society like Canada, any first world nation, would cooperate and participate because that was the rational thing to do. So you had a community group, or you had a school, or you at your place of employment, and you would say to yourself, yeah, I want to cooperate and participate in this community because it's beneficial for me, beneficial for my family, beneficial for the community, and I'll see the growth and the improvement and the sort of net positive from those activities. The problem the government is having now is that participation and cooperation are no longer the rational way to behave. We think this in Bitcoin, right? You're opting out with your money. Chances are some of you guys were at the homeschool talk earlier downstairs. We're opting out, as far as education. You're opting out of the, slop farm on the internet. You're opting out of the slop trough at the restaurants. You're eating better. You're doing all these things. The thing is that much the way we spoke this morning, Richard, Joseph, Rajat, and I about the need for infinite growth and infinite, inflation of products and services, when you stop participating and you stop cooperating, even if you're not doing any harm to anybody, it's still a problem. It's still a problem. And if you've been paying attention in the UK, tweeting about immigration being an issue will, net you a visit from a couple of ill-equipped officers at your door. Have you guys seen that video, that picture? Yeah, everyone's nodding. I don't want to say too much about it, but you get it. If you tweet about something like money in Canada, you already met with quite a bit of side-eye, let's say. At some point, if the currency starts to really wobble or the immigration debate really gets to a fever pitch, saying that stuff online is not going to be allowed. The worst part about it is that you're going to find out it's not allowed when your mail doesn't come to you, or when your ISP throws you off, or when your cell phone provider stops allowing you service, or when someone shows up at your door with a group chat receipt, right? The problem is that this stuff is happening, like Mark said, not in isolation and not necessarily forced down our throats, but pragmatically, there's no difference because, as we saw when I asked who knew about this stuff before, very few people are thinking about it or talking about it. And so I think part of our responsibility as Bitcoiners, whether it's on the money side or on the societal side or on the cultural side, whatever, is to be an amplifier for these things. I realize it's difficult. This is a friendly crowd. It's easy for me to say that here. It may not be so easy at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or whatever. But the thing is that rational people look at this and they are alarmed too. Nobody, thanks to COVID, I think, or at least very few people now, are of the opinion that I'm okay because I have nothing to hide. The problem is that the definition of what you should be hiding is always changing to serve the regime. And if you don't start addressing this now, you will be under the thumb before you know it.
I'm laughing, but
this thing's just flashing up and down.
Before I handed it over to Joey, I sort of jokingly said, do you want to keep voting Liberal? And that might have given the wrong impression that this is a partisan thing. I remember, I've been involved in the internet for a few years, and I lost it for the Harper Conservatives because of I think it was Bill C-93 at the time, was their internet surveillance bill, which at the time raised the level of surveillance to a level that kind of enraged me. And forever, I said, I'm done with the conservative parties. And I joined the Libertarian Party at that point. The takeaway message here is it's incremental and it's kind of a uniparty, right? It doesn't matter which one is in power at the moment, but we're watching either side kind of raising the bar or lowering the bar. Actually, speaking of lowering the bar, the Harper Conservatives put in C-93, which gave all these rights to CSIS and the RCMP to do this surveillance with a warrant. What's happening under C2 and C8, and we don't know yet with C9, actually we do, but with C2 and C8, the word reasonable is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I just took one thing out. This is the clause that says that the Minister of Industry, is it? Which one is Melanie Joly? Yeah. She, that ministry can deplatform somebody, not with a warrant, but with reasonable grounds. And there's a whole process there, but it happens in cabinet, and it is reasonable grounds, and it is warrantless. And so that's the thing that we have to watch out for, because it's this incremental erosion of due process and oversight. And now we've got this additional ratchet down, like the next level. No more warrants. And I was telling Joey, we did a Canadian Bitcoin podcast a few weeks ago, and I sort of told them the anecdote. At EasyDNS, we have our interactions with law enforcement over the course of the years. And for the most part, we're on friendly terms with our opposite numbers in, the Toronto, the OPP, the RCMP. Even CSIS has come to us with requests over the years. They're warrants, they're judicial orders, but those are even Kafkaesque. They call us up, they tell us they're coming to us with an order. You sit in a room, they put the order in front of you, you can write down the date, the order number, the name of the judge who issued it, and the domain name in question. You cannot take a copy of the order. You cannot take any other notes about the order. You have to read it, understand it, hand it back to them, and then make arrangements to hand over the data that they're asking for. Now, granted, it's never been for anyone that anyone in this room would recognize. We've never even known that the domains were on our system, and when we looked at them, it was like, okay, that makes sense. But, one day that same thing is going to happen, and it's going to be for Zero Hedge or for Canadian Bitcoiners or your domain, and it's very Kafkaesque. And with these new provisions, I wouldn't even be able to tell this story on stage. And so that's kind of where we're headed. It's this boiling frog phenomena, and, what do you want to do about that?
Are you passing it to me?
Yeah.
For me, the other thing that's under discussed, because I think the broader population doesn't understand the way that the currency is headed, the 10,000 serial purchase limit. So like Mark said, it's one thing to have a cash purchase limit of $10,000. Presumably if you could produce a receipt for a boat that you drunkenly messaged a guy on Facebook Marketplace about, and then went to pick up in Erin, Ontario on a Sunday morning, and you could, show the guy that you only paid $9,500 for it, presumably that would be okay. And there's, KYC, AML, rationality behind some of these things. We may not necessarily agree with them, but at least it's defensible, okay? The problem is that when the definitions are left intentionally vague, you leave wiggle room to get political or to carry out, to have an axe to grind against certain people, certain transactions. I think Mags was up here yesterday saying that it's going to get more difficult, for example, to buy like $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. Is that going to be allowed? How many people here buy more than $10,000 worth in a year, for example, of Bitcoin? Probably
in cash, though?
I mean, what's cash mean? Cash used to mean paper currency. Now you can't get $10,000 out of the bank. And so because that definition is intentionally vague, you wind up with, okay, well, you got a lot of transactions here off your debit card, for example. Or, you're taking a lot of cash out of the ATM. Let's say you're taking $500 every time you go buy Bitcoin somewhere. Like, these things they all become reasonable, like you said, to look into. And once they start looking, who knows what they're going to find that they don't like, Everyone's got skeletons. Everyone's got problems. There's, like I said earlier, how many people here have read Sovereign Individual? Do you know this book? It's like, the gospel. This is a religious crowd. I don't know if I could say it's like gospel, but...
Why is every hand not up in this room?
You should read The Sovereign Individual, because one of the theses they had, and this book was written 30 years ago, I guess, or 35 years ago at this point, and one of the theses they had was, as government loses control over its population, the adjustment will not be, we need to listen to the people. The adjustment will be, we need to clamp down. And I don't know how anyone can look at this stuff, that reasonable page you put up is great, and say that anything about these legislative options are reasonable. Like I said earlier, it's not just us. This is happening other places too. And we've talked in the past about how there might not be a they behind all this, but it sure fucking seems like it, does it not? And no matter where you go in the modern world, you have these same issues, whether it's at the border between Canada and the United States, whether it's at the airport, whether it's at the bank. I'll tell a story. We had a fence built at my house last year, and my wife went to the bank to get money off our HELOC to do it. It was a fight. The fence was like $3,500, man. Like, the fence is only going to get more expensive. Those limits are never going to be inflation adjusted. And so before you know it, everything you're buying is like triggering a review of your finances, a review of your tweets, whatever. You can't live this way. And I think people in this room know that. But, when you're thinking about, should I be buying Bitcoin every week or every month, I would say, yeah, man. Because, like our friend Hervoye Morich says from Geopolitics and Empire, if you don't opt out of some of these systems, you will be a prisoner of the algorithm ghetto before you know it. Some of you guys probably already are. How many people are scrolling YouTube shorts every day at night, before they go to bed, or Instagram Reels or whatever? You're closer than you think. And as soon as they take away money and your ability to freely transact based on something that's popular or something that's in the ether at the moment, trucker convoy, or who knows, there was a whole era there where you couldn't call somebody fat on the internet without getting fired. Like, if you're fat, you're fat. Why should I be fired for that, But this is where we are, you wind up in a bonbon battle with some heavyweight online, and before you know it, you're out of a job.
Okay, retard, let's talk about...
Love it. How many more untouchables can we do up here? I don't know.
Let's talk about freedom tech a bit. So, the ultimate freedom tech, obviously Bitcoin, that's why we're here. We're the obligatory Bitcoin mention here. But, what about VPNs? Like everyone say, well, use a VPN. The problem, that is an answer, and that should be part of your toolkit, but VPNs nowadays are pretty centralized, right? So you have the same, the reason there is no, there's Easy Web, Easy Mail, Easy DNS. I don't mean to plug the company, but why is there no Easy VPN? There is no Easy VPN because around 5-6 years ago, the RIAA and the Motion Picture Association went to war against VPN providers, and they were getting their credit card merchant accounts canceled, and they were getting debanked left, right, and center. And so other businesses look at that, and Other businesses who might be well positioned to go into the VPN business look at that and say, I'm not doing that because that jeopardizes the rest of my business.
That's called the chilling effect, right?
Yeah. So the solution is decentralized VPN. So I have to say a very bad no-no word here, because most of the decentralized VPN projects happening are happening on other blockchains, right? And so it's true, and it's not happening on Bitcoin yet. I hope it does happen on Bitcoin. I think there are things that will start happening at, that are more like, there's Nostr, of course, but that's not a VPN. That's just a completely decentralized peer-to-peer communications protocol. It's uncensorable, but it's not really private. Simplex and things like that. So it is happening, but I think the Freedom Tech Toolkit has to follow the same direction as the monetary reset, and it has to go with a decentralized solution. Because, I mean, you do Access of Easy every week. We write Access of Easy every week, and we're talking about VPN providers that turn out to be operated by the CCP out of China, or they get hacked. And so we've even seen it happen with the Tor network, where 60% of the Tor exit nodes are operated by FBI honeypots.
Do you know what a Tor exit node is? Everyone's familiar with Tor, right? So Tor is like a quote-unquote private shrouded browser, whatever, but there's always an exit node that the private users use, and the exit node can see all the traffic.
Yes. Yeah, so the other thing, I mean, we're kind of getting towards the end, what you can do. I think there's also, and Brad Mills was talking about it in the prior panel, like get involved civically, politically, even at the local level, probably more importantly at the local level, because I really do think that grassroots changes starts at the bottom and works its way up, not at the top and works its way down. There are some organizations that we've probably all heard about here. There's the, like I mentioned, I'm on the Canadian Internet Society board. They do a lot of good policy work. The Free Speech Union of Canada just started up this year, and the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, they make it, their bag is suing the government when they engage in various kinds of overreach. And Joey and I are involved in a project called Ready.ca, which is like a grassroots thing that's still taking shape, and yet to be determined how we're going to mobilize, but it's really an information exchange and local support thing. So it's the Freedom Tech Toolkit. And of course, Bitcoin is a short on Clown World, right? When you can't do anything else, you can always stack some more sats, and that gives you that optionality down the road that has been hinted on by others.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Mark. I know we have a few minutes. Maybe we'll break rank here. Is there like a question or two? Anybody? I see one there. I don't have a mic for you, but if you want to belt it out there. Yeah, you against the wall there, sir. Yeah. So the question is there a private communications protocol? Right, yeah, it's like, are these private? I'm actually learning smoke signals, so I'll be, you can communicate with me anytime. Just light up a dart and we'll see what happens. Yeah, are birds real? That's a whole other conversation. Anyway, I actually don't know. I know in the U.S. they've started employing this digital canary thing in financial reporting. I was talking to one of you guys about this yesterday. So for something like Apple iMessage, for example, Apple, like Mark said, similar to in Canada, Apple can't tell people by law that someone has asked to see an iMessage or private message or something like that, a government agency, for example. But what they can do is they can put a line in their financial reporting, their quarterly, right, their SEC filing, that says, we haven't been asked to do XYZ by XYZ agency. Sorry, Z, it's a Canadian conference. Those digital canaries are popping up more and more. A lot of companies are putting that in their reporting. That's something to keep an eye on. That doesn't answer your question. For me, private comms, like
Signal and Telegram.
Signal and Telegram are okay, but
assume that they're encrypted.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure if there's no
There's a story that pops up every year or two about Signal and Telegram not being as secure as you think. I know there's stuff like Session, which is a platform that takes sats for a private messaging instance with another person. Have you heard of that one, sir? Okay, so that's one I think you can get for
Keybase,
iPhone.
Signal, Telegram.
Keybase is good too. Keybase is another one that's sort of OG Bitcoiner. When we were really poor at like $3,000 and just cruising for apps to download to look cool, Signal was one, or sorry, Keybase was one that came up a lot. At the end of the day, like, I know we don't like to talk about trust, but you know, if I send Mark a message, I'm trusting that he's going to take care of his device and he's not going to share the message. Probably like you know, when you're sending stuff to your friends, right? Unpopular memes, anti-regime memes. I'd love to see your meme folder. You have to know that the other person is square, you know? And that's getting, I think, easier in Bitcoin, but man, it's hard everywhere else, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It's almost using any quote-unquote encrypted app is itself a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Unless, like, there's some of them have open source stacks or components to them. So, but then unless you're a coder yourself and you can look at the open source and see what's in there, you kind of have to trust once again that enough people who do understand the code have looked at it and sort of blessed it. But it is happening. I mean, let's end on a positive note. The decentralized revolution is proceeding apace. And I think it's always going to be a step ahead because, I mean, some of these ideas that have come out of Parliament Hill when the Trudeau regime was still going, I wrote a response for the Internet Society about the internet kill switch. They had a bill that sort of made it they wanted to pass a bill that made it illegal to taunt politicians. I can't remember which one it was. And it had a kill switch in there. And I just kind of wrote a paper on like how impossible it was to implement on a technical level and any, like you just can't do it. You can't do what this bill says you're supposed to do. So the tech will always be ahead of the law or the legislation, and that'll be our ongoing advantage. I think we're out of time.
We're done. Yeah. If you have more questions about this, Mark really is the guy to ask. I'm not just saying that because he's a friend and the sponsor of the podcast. And I'm also not saying it because he might be wearing the best pair of shoes I've seen in the last 10 years. But he's really the guy who knows this stuff. He's been around long enough to answer your questions. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll get going here.
Thanks.
You could take a deep breath if you want. You could even close your eyes. 3, 2, 1. Deeper relaxed. No, I'm kidding. This isn't a stage hypnosis show. It's actually a talk about being unhypnotized. But you know, sometimes it is good to still take a moment and just take a deep breath, right? Especially at conferences like this where there is a lot of stimulation, there's a lot of inspiration, and it's a perfect time to just settle in, process, allow some time. So I'm here to talk about Bitcoin as a portal to higher consciousness and deeper connection. Is my sound okay for everyone? Okay, thank you. And so when we start talking about hypnosis and this way that, you know, the biggest thing that people say to me, well, besides, are you hypnotizing me right now? They say, can I be hypnotized? And I say, well, everybody is already hypnotized in some capacity. And, you know, the fiat system is an example of all of the programming. And so what I learned as a hypnotherapist and a hypnosis trainer over the last 14 years and somewhere along the way of like 8,000 hypnosis sessions was that I was never needing to hypnotize people. Like I didn't have to, I mean, I could put them in hypnosis and say, okay, you know, you're going to wake up in the morning and exercise at 6 a.m. You know, that's easy hypnosis and it works. But it's not lasting, it's not building, because ultimately if they're not unhypnotized from the things that they think and the things that they believe and the way that they look at life, they're going to default back to that action, back to that reaction, and back to that habit. So I'm going to talk a bit about how that takes into play higher consciousness, how Bitcoin helps unhypnotize people, and why that leads to deeper connection. So what is higher consciousness? Consciousness is generally described as an awareness of your experience. So consciousness is when you're just living in your reality. Whatever is your reality, you're living in it. And higher consciousness is the awareness of the awareness. So higher consciousness is when you're not the storm, but the sky that the storm passes through. And so when we're talking about higher consciousness, we're talking about the awareness of how you're experiencing your reality. And why this matters is because, like, I didn't come to Bitcoin through number go up or investment or tech. I mean, okay, I did. But when I really found Bitcoin and married it, it was because I understood its potential. I understood that, you know, there's such a need for sovereignty. And I'll tell you a story because I really came to Bitcoin through my own dark night of the soul. I had helped thousands of people heal. I have a practice-driven, purpose-driven business. I had the type of business every practitioner wants. And I loved it. I grew. I am so grateful for the healing that I did along the way of helping others. And, you know, about 3 or 4 years ago, I really hit a wall. I burnt out, I felt lonely, I was disappointed in myself because I did what I was supposed to do and helped others. And then the more successful I got, the more I was like trading time with my son. And as a single mom, you know, that's very valuable time. And I really believed I was building a legacy for my son, and that was worth it. And then when I realized, oh, now I just paid more taxes and I'm actually helping tons of people heal from medical malpractice and get off their meds that are keeping them numb. And like I'm like a worker on the on the side of like the medical and industrial complex that just doesn't work, and yet I have no benefits, I have no sick time, I have no pension, I have kind of nothing to show for it, and even my savings are depleting every moment. And so I had to step back, I had to step back and reevaluate, like, what am I really called to do next? And then that's how the Unhypnotized brand grew, and then that's how I started looking at the money. And it just clicked for me. Someone said the other day, I think maybe it was downstairs, they said yesterday, how, when lots of times when women find Bitcoin, they just get it and they're like, okay, good, let's go now. We don't really need a lot of convincing. We don't need a lot of talks, even though we read books, listen to podcasts, of course, too. But I just got it, and once I got it, I could really see how Bitcoin is energy and how it's a frequency. And it's a frequency that will cause you to face your shadow, just like Source. It's divinely ordered. And so I could see how, Bitcoin is essentially capable of like unhypnotizing people. It's like breaks the trance. Because one thing I really learned in that dark night of the soul is that the way to is through. And the way to is through. In feeling the discomfort, right? Well, you guys know, any part of any healing journey is facing the truth. Part of any awakening journey is facing the truth, seeing the truth. And yeah, it can be really annoying when other people don't see the truth. But that's part of the journey too. And in my work, I helped a lot of people face the truth. I helped a lot of people feel into that discomfort and that pain and process it. Because what happens is that when you're feeling that, when you're in that discomfort, when you're seeing the truth, it is the way through. It is the way to the light. It is the way to the solution. But it can be very difficult. It can be very challenging. And sometimes I think that when we bring in Bitcoin into this equation is that it can give us the support in a sense, like, you're not the only one. You're not the only one who sees how messed up everything is. You're not the only one who sees that the system, the state, whatever we want to call it, does not have your health and abundance and well-being at heart. It just doesn't. And it doesn't even matter why or why not sometimes. It just matters, how do you become free? How do you find harmony? How do you find alignment? And I think these things come from within, but of course life is going to give us energy, vibration, connection to help us get there. One of my favorite Bitcoin books is by Scott Deedles, The Tao of Bitcoin. Probably a big surprise. Yeah. I love spirituality and Bitcoin. That book is just, Scott was the second guest on my Unhypnotized podcast ever. It's still one of my favorite episodes. And he speaks in that book about how Bitcoin reflects the same natural order found in life itself, allowing balance to emerge through harmony. And this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about the internal operating system, right? We're talking about that high vibration that is Bitcoin because it aligns with the true values of humanity. Because it aligns with like the true health and well-being of humanity. And so what happens? What happens when there's this shift of consciousness, right? What happens when there's this higher consciousness? Well, sometimes there's healing crises, physical illnesses. Sometimes, there's maybe a realization of debt or ill health. Sometimes there's a shift in friendships and relationships. I mean, how many of y'all have lost friends being a Bitcoiner? Or like, I don't know, wearing your tinfoil hat. you know? And so there are many things that could emerge as a result of like tuning your frequency, as a result of just even Bitcoin being part of your life and being like that tuning fork that's aligning you with higher things. And I know that sometimes it can be difficult to let go, you know, difficult to just let people go or go alone on the track for a while. Take that slower time preference to your health. And so all of these things, I believe, require a courage, you know, require a certain amount of courage. And what they really require is a certain amount of trust in yourself. And that's one of the things that I'm speaking to in this way, that again, if higher consciousness is the awareness of your awareness, so you're really being aware of what you're experiencing, it's going to also cause you to be aware of how you're reacting. And again, just like we could say maybe trance work, like hypnosis or shamanism, or these sort of like really high frequency ways of connecting to our inner wisdom, just like Bitcoin, they can just turn shit upside down, you know? And it's those moments, the way to is through. It's those moments that give you the information, take people out of your life, maybe even make you just one day quit your job, you know? Those moments, that pain, that just, I can't continue moving on a path that is no longer in alignment to my true values, to what I am feeling called to do in the world. And so this brings us into systems. You know, I love Jeff Booth, and Jeff Booth says, you know, how you can't change the system from within the system. We need to build new systems. And we're seeing this all over the place, right? Like, it's sort of like you can't create peace from war. It just doesn't math. And so when we're thinking about creating new systems, right, it's so inspirational here. There's so many people doing so many amazing creative things that are part of creating a new system. And when we're thinking about consciousness and change, so as a hypnotist, you can imagine all of the people that come to me and say, Heather, help me stop eating this, help me stop doing this, help me start doing this. You know, there's always a habit that they want to change or that they just haven't been able to. And that's okay, because generally they're coming at it from a very kind of being in the system, right? Like, I've got to be better, I've got to be more disciplined, I've got to be more motivated, I've got to do better. And it's a very hard road of like building a habit from action. Especially if there's not an inner alignment. So when we're talking about a leap of consciousness, it's creating change from a less linear, what I think of as like a fiat sort of push, force, do, to like a vertical leap. Because leaping consciousness is once you see, you can't unsee. You know, you're Bitcoiners. Once you see, you can't unsee. No one is going to be able to convince you that the fiat printing money machine is good. You saw it, you can't unsee it. And so what happens when this happens with personal work is it allows that vertical leap happens. Like, it's a new blueprint, it's a new map, it's creating a new foundation every time it happens. And it just causes you to do things differently. You might fall back on some old habits and feel the pain, and every time you do, you'll feel the pain, and that's good. That's great. That's the beauty of being human. Like, your body, your life, will let you know when you're out of alignment. And what happens, that's one of the things I hear the most, which is, wow, Heather, like, I just woke up and I'm not doing that anymore. I just stopped doing that, or I just started doing that. And it is because once you allow that to just process, move through you, be the sky, not the storm, it brings up your vibration, and then you're operating at a different frequency. And at that frequency, your old habits don't align. So they, just like people, will fall out of your life. So what does this have to do with deeper connection? You know, because I think what we're really experiencing in the world right now is a lot of division due to reactivity. And when we don't realize and have even, let's say, just consciousness, right? Just awareness. When we don't have awareness as to what is coming up in ourselves, or at least being able to step back and go, man, I'm tripping. Like, I'm so triggered right now, and like every time you say that to me, or every time I hear this, I want to yell, scream, act, kill a man, right? And what is happening is that people aren't understanding how they are reacting from their discomfort. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, we've got like a media world that we're paying for to put the fear in people, right? So I have a lot of understanding and compassion for people, because I understand what it's like to be human and to be triggered and have to face my own stuff when I thought I did the work, you know? I have a lot of compassion for people. It's just the problem is that we're missing how when we're making decisions from that place of fear, from that place of reactivity, it's not usually for the greater purpose. And worse, the reason why we're feeling so bad is because like something's not connecting. There's a disconnect. We could call it cognitive dissonance. But there's a disconnect between what we truly want in the world and what we think is happening, right? Think of all these people at a level of consciousness that's like, we have got to, you know, believe everything they're telling us is wrong with the world and blame all the people they're telling us for it. This is a hypnosis. This is a mass hypnosis, and it's also where we're meant to be, what we're meant to be doing. So, Bitcoin as a portal. Thinking about, I don't know, maybe some of you want to get out of a fiat job that you have. Maybe some of you feel a higher calling, but just like haven't been able to have the courage to write that article or record yourself on video, or I don't know, maybe even leave your relationship. It's not for me to say, it's never for anybody else to say. And I think I'll drive this home with like this knowing that we want deeper connection. You know, it's part of why we come to Bitcoin conferences, because we can connect with people where we don't have to like fight and defend. We can come together and learn and see how there are people that want to create a better world like me. And the connection drives that high time preference, right? The connection drives that, well, I could probably get a date right now, actually. You know, it's like pretty easy to get a date. You can order a date like you can order a burger, right? And so this is the culture that we're living in. This is, you know, the culture. There are hundreds of ways that you can numb your discomfort. But the problem is it's always going to surface. And then Bitcoin, I think, shines a light on that, you know, and this isn't about us being perfect or the perfect example. This is about us coming from that place of understanding in ourselves that if we take the time and have a little bit of patience and just feel through what's coming up for us, and really have the courage to make decisions that are aligned with your highest desire, it's amazing. It's actually amazing. Like, I believe in miracles because I believe miracles are course corrections. So miracles happen all the time. You meet that, but you just meet one connection, or there's one synchronistic thing, or you see the sign to like just come on stage and talk about consciousness at a Bitcoin conference. I don't know, and you just follow that and see where it goes. So that's pretty much what I came here to say. I learned along the way that authenticity is a very high vibration, and I think it's really connected at the same frequency as Bitcoin. I am really excited about the next phase of my work, which is just continuing to bring in the unhypnotized brand and just the information around deprogramming, but not in this way like you don't have to rewire or do all these like affirmations or tell yourself like these types of things. I mean, you can believe that things are always working out for you, and they will, definitely. But you don't have to force yourself to change what you believe. And so if this interests anyone, I am opening a membership in the new year called Proof of Mind. So I'm bringing all my people and all my students and like all the Bitcoiners I know and have worked with as clients one-to-one into a school community. And I set up just like a preliminary landing page form if you want to add your email list to stay in, your email to the list to stay in touch. I'm not sure if it's on there, but it's hypnoheather.com/proof of mind. And you can always, I have cards and stuff like that around. You can always come talk to me. You can find me on IG or X. You can also go on YouTube to the Unhypnotized podcast. I did season 1, all about consciousness, health, spirituality, and Bitcoin. Season 2, I did dating, Bitcoin dating in a fiat world. I love to talk about dating. I think relationships are as much a part of this as money and health. And then season 3, I'm coming back to health. So I think that's all I have to say. I have like 4 minutes. Does anyone have a question? Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. I love talking about that. I talk about that all the time because, I am not a fan of diagnosis in general. I'm fine with it if it helps people realize what's going on with them and helps them get to what they need for healing. But I think of alternative health actually more as traditional health. I think of alternative health as actual health, like not, some other form of health, because true health is innate. True health is accessible through your operating system of innate wisdom. And I mean, every industry has a bunch of fiat in it. Like, I met people that would say to me, "Oh, Heather, I'm a master hypnotherapist." I'm like, crazy, how'd you get that title? And they're like, "Oh, I took this 3-day online training course." I was like, so how many sessions I did? Like, I don't even consider myself a master. And so obviously there's a lot of certifications, but I can't even be that hard on it, honestly, because like we come in where we're at, just like you get Bitcoin where you deserve. I took an 8-day course, then I started training an 8-day course until I built a 3-month course online, until I used to work with clients like my teacher told me, do 2 sessions and they're good, you know? Now my clients are 3 to 4 months. So I don't blame it, but like every industry is full of fiat. And it's full of people that just like, you know, are really in their own reality. It's like we were talking earlier, you know, how it's okay that that's what you think. Like if you are really into hypnosis and you think, oh, hypnosis can heal everything. Well, it can, but it has like a real distinct purpose. So, well, that's my time. Thanks everyone for listening and coming.